No, I'm not catching up.
Good morning. Today is Tuesday, September 10th, 2019. This is a regular meeting of the Los Angeles Board of Police Commissioners. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Good morning. Let the record reflect Commissioners Decker, Goldsmith, Soboroff, Bonner, and Figueroa Villa are present, and we have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Figueroa Villa, I understand you wanted to make a statement.
Okay, good morning. I read the Los Angeles Times story from August 30th and have reviewed my Form 700 filings. The requirements for police commissioners for the Form 700 are set by the LAPD Conflict of Interest Code. That code does not require commissioners to provide their income on Schedule C of the Form 700. However, my income is publicly disclosed every year as part of my nonprofit's IRS Form 990. These annual filings are available for download on the internet. I have been honored to serve as a police commissioner for the past 6 years, representing our community on matters such as the use of force reform, the movement toward relationship-based policing, and other oversight responsibilities at the LAPD. I have also been honored to serve for the past 39 years as an employee and executive director of El Centro del Pueblo, providing social services such as counseling, drug prevention, social rehabilitation, employment, outreach, education, health services, HIV/AIDS education, and prevention services and youth services in an effort to improve the quality of life of the diverse communities of Los Angeles. As someone who has dedicated my life to public service, I will continue to uphold the highest standards of integrity and accountability to our residents and to the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you for your statement. Before we get started on today's agenda, I'll just note we have 3 reports from the department and 10 donations on the regular agenda items. With respect to donations, I'd like to just address that issue more broadly and let my fellow commissioners know that at the end of the regular agenda, I'm going to make a motion that I'd like you to consider, and I'd like members of the public to comment on if they feel that they wish to. I did a quick review of matters related to donations since I joined the board a number of months ago, and I also asked some questions of the Inspector General regarding donations. And I note that last February we received a report about the volume of donations and the amounts and who the donors were. And in 2017, that was approximately 2.6 million. In 2018, approximately 2.7 million, respectively. And in August, we reviewed the department manual on the acceptance of donations. But I see today's agenda of proposed donations are especially large due to one particular donation, but exceeds all the donations of 2017 and 2018 combined. And I bring this up not in the context to say donations are inappropriate. They are appropriate. I've been on the other side of the city's budget process, and I see how challenging the budget process is. Frequently, there are just not enough funds to fund everything the city wishes to, even though there are many, many worthy projects. And things get cut even when city officials really wish that they would not. At the same time, I recognize the department is a fiduciary for a large amount of money on the purchase of equipment or taking care of the donations in particular. And I'd like to be sure that we as a board, in conducting our oversight, will do all we can to ensure that the department's doing all it can to be a good fiduciary of all of those donations. So I spoke to the Inspector General, and at the end of today's regular agenda, I plan to make a motion to have the IG conduct a full review of the department's process and procedures, how, if at all, the department can get better in the handling of handling the donations, and in its process procedures and in the oversight of those money, and accept any recommendations from the IG on how the process can be approved, if at all. I'm asking the IG's office to do a holistic review of the donation process so that we can be better equipped to handle all the donations. But with that said, we'll proceed to the regular agenda, and as we come up to the various donations, I'd be interested in commissioners' comments, members of the public comments regarding that, and then at the end of the regular agenda, I'll propose that motion in some form. So turning to the regular agenda, there are the first three items relate to similar or related items related to the small unmanned aerial system deployment system. Assistant Chief Frank, if you and your team could come up, and I'll be asking you to comment on, present on A, B, and C, if you wouldn't mind, sir.
Morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Morning, Commissioners.
Good morning. If you could introduce yourselves, please.
Assistant Chief Horace Frank, Director, Office of Special Operations.
Captain Jonathan Tippett, Commanding Officer of Metropolitan Division.
Sean Parker, Command Officer of Air Support Division.
Good morning. If you could. Chief Frank, are you going to be making a presentation on what you are requesting the board to do?
Yes, Commissioner, good morning. We are requesting for the board to approve what was once a pilot to now normalize what we're proposing a special order to solidify the use of the UAS as a regular department, as a regular deployment for our Special Weapons and Tactics team, along with for deployment based on the requirements that are set forth before the commission, allow us the deployment to add to the Special Weapons and Tactics team to allow our hazardous materials team, specifically the bomb squad.
I can't hear because of Herman.
Mr. Herman, sir, could you keep your comments low? Thank you, sir. Chief, please continue.
Yes, ma'am. So to add in addition to our Special Weapons and Tactics team, to allow the use of the UAS in certain circumstances by bomb squad and hazardous materials operators.
Yes, sir. And with respect to B and C, those donations, if you could explain their relationship.
In addition, there are two items before the board that we're requesting permission to accept. One is the donation of a Mavic Enterprise Dual UAS to replace. This item will replace the current DJI Spark that we use. We're requesting the board to allow us to accept that donation from the Parker Foundation. And the second item that we're requesting permission to accept from the board is a software that we use on the UASs to track all training and operational deployments. So we're asking the board to allow us to accept that software as a donation from the Measure Aerial Intelligence Group.
Very good. I know Commissioner Bonners and Commissioner Figueroa Villa, you work on the subcommittee that's worked on these items. I think I'll ask you to ask questions first, if you don't mind, and then open it up to the rest of the commissioners.
Appreciate that. Good morning.
Good morning.
I know that we had an opportunity to, since the last time you were here before the commission, we had an opportunity to review some of the additional changes that were being made to formalize the program. And when I saw the package that came back through this morning, I had a couple of additional questions that I needed to run through with you quickly on the draft, the guidelines themselves.
Yes, sir.
And the first question is on page 2, just relating, and this is in the context just trying to understand operationally really how the system will work. With regard to under responsibilities that the assigning the UAS to the remote pilot in charge, is that a standing assignment? Like, are there I think there's 4 pilots if I'm recalling correctly, and are they going to each have one that's permanently assigned to them in the trunk of the vehicle or something, or is it assigned per incident?
No, Commissioner. The SWAT truck that goes out in every SWAT call out, they will have the devices on board the truck. So right now, Special Weapons and Tactics team, they've got 12 individuals who've been trained as a cadre to operate the devices. So one of them will always be on standby. So they will basically get the device from the vehicle to deploy. So no, they won't have it specifically assigned to them.
So the
It's assigned to
device
the
would be
unit.
in the vehicle,
In the
and
vehicle.
not taken home in the evening and not assigned to any individual.
No, sir.
Along those lines. And then also you were addressing relative to SWAT. Is the same true relative to the hazmat?
The same will apply. The same will apply to our hazardous materials unit, which would be the bomb squad and our hazmat unit. The device will be on the vehicle, and then, as they respond as part of their standby duties, the vehicle will respond with them.
Excellent, okay. And then with regard to the permissible uses, at the top of this, the list of the various permissible uses, on the top of page 4, the third bullet there is relative to warrant services. Are those all high-risk warrants?
Yes,
By
Commissioner, these will be for high-risk warrants, yes, sir.
Okay. And then with regard to the prohibited uses, there's the discussion about the sensitivities around any constitutional sensitivities, privacy, and so on. And one thing I'm wanting to make sure I understand is relative to any checks on this process to make sure that there isn't any inadvertent or purposeful use that may not be consistent with the guidelines. I see that there is a process where the program manager will have some ability to review any of the video or other elements of this to determine. But is that the primary check in the system to make sure that that there wasn't any video captured that for whatever reason shouldn't have been captured, or any inappropriate use?
So there are several checks in the system, Commissioner. So when at every response that the team uses on this device, we're going to have, in the case of SWAT, there will always be a SWAT, one of the commanding officers from Metropolitan Division. They will always be on scene. We will also have on scene a staff officer from Counterterrorism Special Operations Bureau. They will always be on scene at every SWAT call out. So they will be there to monitor the use of the device, make sure it's being used appropriately once they go through the process. The device also has an internal mechanism that tracks all of its deployment. So at any given moment, for investigative purposes, if we had to go back and track it, we can certainly do that. And that's one of the mechanisms that are in place.
And but in terms of after the fact, is the idea that that there will be any whether it's in program or project manager review or IG review or audit or any of that feature? I mean, what is the broader check on the system? Just
So like all with our other systems, the Inspector General's office always has it's always within their purview to go back and do audits of everything that we have, whether it's body-worn video, digital in-car video. This will be no exception.
And we had a conversation about and there's the reference in here also to the video being retained and consistent with the doc or the records retention policy. And what I don't recall from that conversation was whether the conversation was about whether there was any risk that the device could be deployed and the video not captured. And I recall there was some additional look as to whether that was technically possible or whether the device automatically records. Can you remind me what the...
Well, it is technically possible that the operator does not turn the device on, but that is the requirement that prior to when they deploy, they have to turn on the video. Similar to our body-worn videos, our officers have to turn that body-worn video. There are no reasons for them not to turn it on, and it's certainly indicated that they have to turn it on. If they don't, they must have some specific articulable reason as to why not. But the requirement is that they do turn it on.
I imagine in this context, you would know, I mean, if you're responding to an incident, you're going to know whether it's because you're deploying it for the purpose of capturing video. I'm talking about the retention portion of it now in terms of incident is resolved. Is the video necessarily captured as part of, and available for a subsequent look? Or does it, do you have to cause the device to actually record the video for future reference?
When the officer deploys the device, they have to turn it on. They have to cause the device to record that video. Once the recording is done, it's all submitted after every operational deployment. It's turned in and booked as evidence and retained for the Department's retention policy, which is a minimum of 5 years.
But again, there's no risk then that you turn the device on, you get the information you need on scene, and then you later determine that we didn't push record. We caught, we responded to the incident, we saw what we needed to see, but we forgot to push record.
If I may, part of the program and the system related to it is that they get immediate feedback from what looks like an iPad device.
Yep.
It shows on there that it's recording, so it shows that it's active, if that answers your question
Yeah.
a little bit better.
Yep,
Okay.
exactly. Okay, appreciate that. And how many program managers are there?
There is one program manager, and that is Lieutenant Chuck Springer, who's at Air Support Division.
Okay.
He will be the program manager when we add the other entities involved.
And then lastly, there was a reference in here to some of the evaluation that was some of the things you looked at in forging these guidelines. And the question that I also wanted to revisit again was you also consulted the other policy and procedures in place at other police departments, if I recall.
Yes, sir. When we initially began looking at this as a pilot, our folks did an extensive review of other law enforcement agencies, not just law enforcement, but also public agencies that were involved in the use of UASs. We reviewed a lot of their policies. In fact, a lot of the things that they had in place, we looked at best practices and employed those. In addition to more stringent, other stringent requirements we put into ours, I should say, we employed those as part of our guidelines. But yes, we did look at those policies. We also looked at the kind of devices that they were using.
But it's and is it correct to say that we're maintaining a more conservative approach to the program?
I think it's very safe to
That's the
say, sir,
goal.
that our approach is much more conservative and restrictive.
Okay. I mean, there are some departments, for example, that deploy these devices in the trunk. My first question about who has it, right? Am I correct that there are some departments that have these in patrol units?
Yes, sir. There are other departments in Southern California that actually do deploy them as part of their regular patrol operations.
Right, okay.
But we don't.
And there's no latitude that any officer has to deploy any, whether it's a department-issued device or any other device. And
Not as part of our regular, not as part of their on-duty requirements. Absolutely not, sir.
got it. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I'm good, yeah.
Are there other questions?
I don't have any questions other than if there was ever a pilot that was followed to the T with strict restrictions flawlessly, this has been it, and I congratulate you on that.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Ladies and gentlemen, please don't shout out during the meeting. There's time for public comment. Thank you.
Appreciate the diligence on the pilot program and some of the great concerns at the time that it was adopted and that the policy was meant to address were related to transparency and accountability, some of which Commissioner Bonner just addressed in terms of information that's required to be recorded and provided to the public, storage of the data, the lack of facial recognition software, as well as weaponization, and just want to confirm that those principles are still in place, and if you've made changes to any of that, if you could describe them.
Commissioner, you're correct. No, those are prohibitions, and they are documented in the proposed guidelines, and they have not changed, and I don't foresee them changing either.
Thank you.
Chief, I have a few questions as
Yes,
well. In the policy, there's a reference to this equipment assisting with respect to de-escalation, and I'm wondering if you can describe not only your observations and experiences during the pilot program, but when you inquired of other departments and their uses, what can we expect in terms of this policy assisting in the efforts to further everyone's efforts for de-escalation?
Thank you, Commissioner. Well, Commissioner, whenever we deploy a device, whether it's the UAS or a less than lethal device.
Ladies and gentlemen, please, we need to proceed with this presentation, sir.
Anything that we deploy, anything that would result in us allowing to be able to take an individual into custody without harm to that individual or without harm to a police officer, we consider that a good thing. The use of the SUAS is no exception. I've seen many times out in the field when we've been able to use this to minimize any injury or danger to our officers and to the individuals. Like I indicated at the last commission meeting, back in June of last year, when we used this, actually June earlier this year, when we used this device, when the individual, we had spent hours trying to get that individual to surrender at a scene of a suspected person with a gun. Individual was refusing to surrender after hours and hours of having our patrol units there, having an airship on top. SWAT units got on board. They tried to crash CNT with that individual. He refused to surrender. The minute we deployed the device at the entrance of the trailer where that individual was, and he saw it, the person gave up. So that was certainly an area where we saw the use of this resulting in de-escalation of something that certainly could have been a lot worse. And we've seen it on other incidents also. In other agencies, they've experienced that same level of success in getting individuals to gaining compliance of individuals without injury to that individual or to anyone else.
Chief, this new equipment raises legitimately concerns about privacy.
Yes.
And I reviewed the policy, and I see you added a number of things in light of some of the prior presentations to the commission, including the warrant requirement. But I wonder if you can explain a little more clearly your perception of how this will be deployed and at the same time protect the privacy interests of the citizens in our communities.
Of course, Commissioner. So one of the things we added in this particular segment that was not there before, on the prohibited uses, we added the fact that unless a lawful exception applies, the department personnel shall obtain a search warrant or other lawful process when required under the Fourth Amendment or other provisions of the law. What we wanted to make sure is that the U.S. was not being used in a flippant manner, just because we want to consider it as a law enforcement issue. So, other than those situations where the proposed manual section specifically states that we're going to use it, absent those, there's no other way else that we're going to be using this device. And if we were to change any of that in the future, we would have to come back to this particular body. We really wanted to strike that balance between Fourth Amendment, before an individual's right to privacy. We really want to strike that balance between that and, of course, the safety issue. So we've instituted all these particular measures in place to ensure that we kind of strike that balance. The other portion that we have in place is that we have, when you look at our protocols in terms of approval for the use of this device, we're very strict in terms of the process that we go through to get approval, and then the oversight that we have in place to make sure the device is not being abused in any way.
And what would be the consequence of violating the policy?
That would be considered misconduct and would be certainly dealt with in accordance with our regular policies.
Ladies and gentlemen, please, the time for public comment is coming shortly, please. I'd like to refer to the items B and C with respect to the equipment that is being requested. And if you could explain that a little clearer, and in particular, I'd like to know what it is you're specifically asking approval of and what the end result is. In other words, what's the end result of the amount of equipment the department will have if these items are approved?
So the first item, Commissioner, would be the request for approval, and it says monetary, but it's actually the equipment donation of that value, $6,645, for the Mavic Enterprise Dual system. One of the things that our officers found out while flying indoors, is that the integrated GPS routinely disconnected from the available satellites. This resulted in a much more precarious and less predictable flight pattern of the device, the former device that we were using, which was the DJI Spark. The onboard sensors were unable to pick up the surrounding terrain, so this particular new device that we're asking for, which is the Mavic Enterprise Dual, which is the same producer, DJI. It uses the same platform, so it allows the officers to much easier transition from the Spark to this particular device. This new device takes care of all the voids, the problems that we saw with the old Spark, in that it has new technology that addresses the above problems. While it maintains the same flight platform, it also gives us also has a much larger flight time. The older device, Spark, I think had 16 minutes. This one allows us 30 plus minutes of flight time, which is very important for us also. With regards to the second item, which is the software, what this does, again, this is a software that the donor is providing to us. It provides an integral digital record of the flight and where it goes. So basically, it's going to allow us to map the route whenever we fly the devices, whether it's on a training mission or an actual operational deployment. Allows us to map the route. So if we have to go back for investigative purposes to review that, we have something in place that allows us to do that.
So what's the end result of the amount of equipment the department will have if these are approved?
If these are approved, so for the software, it's $1,400, and for the
I'm sorry, I wasn't clear on my question. How many devices do you use now? Is it 4?
So right now we have 4 devices.
4 devices?
Yes, ma'am.
And one of them is being taken out of service, is that right? Is
Correct.
it at the end of life?
The
or something?
DJI Spark. Well, that's the one that has the disadvantages that we talked about earlier when used indoors. That's the DJI Spark. So
And
that's
is that being retired?
we're going to retire that.
Okay.
And then replace it with the Mavic Enterprise.
So then there would still be 4 devices, is that
Yes,
correct?
ma'am. We'll be using 4.
All right. With respect, with respect to B and C, it asks for very specific equipment or software. And with respect to the specificity of the equipment you're requesting, how is it that we know that that is the correct equipment or the best equipment for this department to have? What's been the research or the background on that?
So, Commissioner, kudos to our folks in the SWAT unit that did the research. They did a lot of extensive research. Spent years reviewing this stuff before this even came into play. They looked at what several other agencies, law enforcement agencies around the country, what they were using. They looked at the various systems out there, and basically there are about 3 companies out there that dominate the market. DJI has about 93% of the market, so those are the products. And when we looked at their products, we looked at the pricing and the capabilities. The benefits that their products offered far outweighed the others. In fact, the majority of law enforcement agencies in the country, they're using DJI products.
Colleagues, I'm not sure if you were aware we'd be asking questions on B and C. If you have any questions on items B and C?
No.
No? Very well. Madam Secretary, how many comment cards do we have on item A?
We have 8 cards.
Okay, let's begin on item A if we could.
We begin with Jonathan Foster, Michael Novick, Hamid Khan, Gina Viola, Adam Smith, Jamie Garcia, Audrey George, and Akhil Gopal.
Thank you. Mr. Foster, I believe you're first, sir.
I didn't have a whole bunch to say about this. I did look at it, and I got to the same conclusion I've gotten to on a few other things, is this needs to be voted on by the people. This needs to be put on the ballot, that you can use an aerial drone, and what are you doing with the drone? It's left to, this guy gets elected, then he appoints his buddies over here, and then you guys get to make a decision, and then the people aren't being heard. And this is some of the research, I guess you would call it, as I've come down here. I've learned that this concept actually needs to take place with many of the decisions this panel makes. Shouldn't be made by this panel. It should be made by the 4 million people of the county collectively should be making these decisions. It should be put on the ballot. Everybody should read it. Take a few months or weeks to go over it, maybe a few years. If you want to use the drone, I guess sometimes it's proven to help. But it should be left up to the people.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Novick?
Yeah, I think we're witnessing the exact definition of mission creep. This started out when LAPD accepted a couple of drones that the city of Seattle decided they didn't want to use. They did it without any policy in place, any authorization. People said, when you have drones, it's going to be a case of mission creep. So now you're upgrading. You approved a temporary pilot project, and as the officer said when they introduced this, they're going to normalize it with this step. So you can't normalize the use of drones. You allow the police to write in their own policies on this. It's ridiculous. So you're asking them about what measures they've taken to deal with the objections raised by the people of this city. That's your job, not their job. So if they write in restrictions, so they're saying, oh, well, we're not going to have any facial recognition, we're not going to have any weapons on it, not even less lethal weapons. But that's them writing those regulations. So that's a manifestation of the fact that even they're aware of the dangers of having drones in the first place, and they're trying to cover their ass. It's your job to put a stop to this program, not to defer to their wisdom on having it. What you're saying is that they have this toy that they got, and it's inadequate. They said it wasn't functioning properly when they put it in the situations they want to use it. So now they're being upsold by the people who made the same thing to say, oh yeah, we have a better product now, it's even better, it'll fly longer, it'll have better ability to go inside people's houses and see what's going on. So you're basically rubber stamping exactly what people talked about in the first place, mission creep. And the next step will be they'll come back and say, well, we actually need the ability to have facial recognition. And you'll say, oh, we didn't realize that. Well, yes, we'll go ahead and approve that too.
Mr. Khan, I believe you're next.
One of the things that became very obvious when Sandra Figueroa Villa's corruption and bribery scandal was exposed by the LA Times of accepting money from Predpol and not even showing it to the Ethics Commission was how this body serves as a shock absorber for the system. Somebody earlier spoke about that this should be put on the ballot. This was put on the ballot. This is not a new thing. The fight has been going on since 2014. People spoke out loudly in June of 2014. People spoke out loudly in September of 2014. People spoke out loudly. Beatrice Girmala is right here, and she was the one who spoke right here in October of 2017.
Sir, please
that
put
out
the
of the
sign down.
1,600 emails, only 97 of the people approved of the drones. 6% of the people approved of the drones. Out of 1,100 people on policy, less than 5% approved of that to begin with. The people have been fighting back, and as Soboroff would say, because of course he's complicit in a lot of these things as well, right? So the whole idea of commanding officers, the commanding officers were there and the policy was there when the antennas were intentionally broken on patrol cars by LAPD officers, the digital in-car video. The commanding officer was there and the policy was there when they were forcing people to manufacture reasonable suspicion in the laser program, which was roundly discredited and dismantled by this man, the chief himself, in April of 2014. The commanding officers and all of these sets of protocols and policies have been in place, but violation after violation after violation. The commanding officers are there when Grishario Mack was murdered, and this body said that it was out of policy, but nothing can be done because more protects them. So where are all these commanding officers? Because the people have spoken constantly. The people have spoken repeatedly. You know that, Shane. You missed out. You were there at the Westwood Town Hall. You guys did all those 4 town halls in one day, in San Pedro, in Westwood, in Atwater Village, and other places as well. And people completely and loudly said no. Horace Frank was there. He lied about a lot of these things. So you can't let this happen. People have been fighting against it. People have been...
Thank you, sir. Ms. Viola, you're next. Mr. Khan. Mr. Khan. Mr. Khan. Thank you, sir. Ms. Viola. Ms. Viola. Thank you, ma'am.
People continue to speak over and over and over again in this room, and you continue to ignore them. In the summer of 2017, when the LAPD wanted to start a drone pilot program, which I would argue is less than flawless, communities across LA clearly rejected the use of drones by LAPD. In 2017, LAPD's own surveys showed that out of over 1,600 people surveyed on the use of drones, only 97 said yes. Only 97. That's less than 6% of people even approving the use of drones. Then LAPD asked for feedback on drone use policy. As per their own admission, out of over 1,100 people responding, only 6 said yes. Only 6 out of 1,100. Yet in October of 2017, the Police Commission, against intense community opposition, voted 3-1 to launch the LAPD's drone pilot program. That's what continues to happen in this room. You hear from the public in this room, you hear from the public online, and you continually ignore them. Continually ignore them. Mission creep, as Mr. Novick said, alludes to the application of a specific tactic expanded beyond the original stated scope towards new and enlarged purposes. Mission creep is deeply inherent in the LAPD drone program. LAPD is upgrading the drones for longer flight times, cover longer distances, install spotlights, speaker systems, expanding night flying capabilities, adding high-resolution visual sensors, and infrared and thermal sensors. If this isn't militarization of the police, I don't know what is. It is dangerous. LAPD is dangerous. You have a police chief who doesn't do anything about dangerous police officers to begin with. Stop the drones now. Shut it down.
Mr. Smith, you're next, sir. Mr. Smith? Sir, please do not shout out during the meeting. Sir, please stop shouting out. Mr. Smith, it's your turn to speak, sir. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I find it, never mind. I was at the Westwood meeting when Commissioner Goldsmith was there and Chief Frank was talking his game. I noticed, Chief Frank, that you said that this donation this morning is from the Parker Foundation, so I'm wondering, this says Los Angeles Police Foundation, and that's different. So I'm wondering if the record's going to reflect that he doesn't know where the donation's coming from for this. But it doesn't really matter. You just need more military equipment. I also want to say that whoever sends out the email or whatever that says, we need more cops in the seats today, there's going to be a lot of people, let's fill up the seats so people don't have a place to sit. Whoever does that's fucking shameful. I don't know where that directive comes from. You can shake your head at me, but it comes from somewhere. Otis, you want to say anything? Yeah, I'll just reiterate, like, you especially, Chief, talk about transparency and accountability, and speakers before me and the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition's been saying it for years, like, you don't ever reflect what's best for the community, what the community wants, what the community asks for. You impose this Air Force, you impose more cops in parks, more cops in public housing. This isn't community policing, this is policing of the community.
Madam Secretary, I didn't get the last three names. The next three names, ma'am?
The next three names, and we also have an additional 4 late cards. I'm not sure if you want to.
Can I get the
first
three names?
The last three: Jamie Garcia, Audrey George, and Akhil Gopal.
Ms. Garcia, thank you.
So lifting off the last point about community policing, it's actually laughable considering that you accepted drones in 2014 from a community that said they didn't want them. So how are you building with communities if you're actually taking militarized equipment that nationally people are saying no to? So let's think about that. And you've heard all your own surveys, all your own data gathering, and how people didn't want this, yet you're going forward with this program. So there is no community building here. There is doing what you want, succumbing to law enforcement. And let's talk about accountability. We already heard about the laser program, commanding officers, opening up chronic offender bulletins that you have decided to not do anymore, never being punished. We have not had a hearing. We have not found out what is going on in these laser zones, but by our own efforts, we're finding out how many people have been killed in those laser zones. So don't tell us about how you're going to discipline commanding officers, because you don't do that. Let's talk about this tracking of drone use. You can't even fucking track Predpol and what's going on with Predpol. So don't sit here and tell us that you're going to track and trace things, because you can't do it. You don't do it. And then let's talk about facial recognition. Why don't you talk about your gang enforcement detail unit that's being trained on facial recognition? Let's talk about how facial recognition doesn't need to be put on a drone. Shane, all they have to do is grab that data and run it through the software. So you are not protecting us from facial recognition. You are already using it. We do not trust you. Now, lastly, how dare, Eileen Decker, you talk about de-escalation? Do you not see the family here? Do you not see the family of Grishario Mack here? How dare you say that a machine will de-escalate when your own officers go into a mall, guns blazing? There is no de-escalation here at all. Take a look. Have some dignity. Have some respect. And there will be no politeness in this room. There will be no politeness. We will not tolerate this anymore. You will not have politeness. So get over it.
Ma'am, thank you. Ms. George, you're next, ma'am.
Drones are military equipment. Military equipment are meant to kill people, to surveil people, to treat everyone in the area as though they are insurgents. I was one of the hundreds of people here in October of 2017, inside and outside, protesting this pilot program, writing the emails that you totally ignored. I was one of thousands of people, not one of the 6% at the most who were in favor of drones. Nobody who came that day to speak was in favor of the drones. You all have 100% all along the way known you were going to approve the pilot program, known you were going to approve the plan to extend it, known you were going to approve any plans to normalize it. Why are they retiring that one drone? Because of mission creep, because the new drone is going to be more amenable to being weaponized later with increased surveillance and lethal force weapons. Shame on all of you. Any of you that haven't been personally touched by the harm that militarized police can cause, racist militarized police, where's your vision? Mr. Bonner, why can't you imagine that one of your children someday is going to be stopped and shot down, and possibly that a drone will contribute to that situation? Why can't you imagine the harm, the murders? Shame on you all.
The next speaker, sir. Can you restart the clock? Thank you, sir.
So I want to take us back to 2014, but before that, I want to say that the police and the LAPD would be genocidal and brutal with batons and binoculars. So it's not about drones, it's about what you all exist to do, okay? But talking about drones for a second, going back to 2014, I want to point out our friend Horace Frank over here, who went to Palestine and lit up when he was talking about Israel's drone program, specifically the Sky Sapiens, which had all of the gadgets he ever wanted, including facial recognition, etc. And then since then, it seems to have made it his personal mission to bring drones to LAPD. I was there in 2017 at the meeting that he held when he saw the entire community. By the way, this is a last-minute meeting that he hoped nobody would show up to. He hoped, and then all 4 of the meetings, every single meeting, we all stood in opposition to this, to the drones that Seattle itself rejected. Okay? So then since then, you guys have shoved it down our throats. And what I want to say right now, in this moment, is that this is about what is happening in Palestine is happening here, which is that this land is not yours, and you're using drones as a tool to keep your hold over stolen land. Land is not yours, it's not mine, it's Tongva land. And on that land, you have more than half the resources. You have more than half the resources, and you're using violence to keep those resources in the exact same way that they're doing that in Palestine. So what is actually happening is a perfect analogy to that. And the DJI drones that you guys are trying to get, that is the exact type of drone that the Israeli forces used to drop tear gas on Palestinian protesters in the Great March of Return. That's what we're talking about when we say mission creep, is that these drones, which are made in China and in Palo Alto in our own, and in Cerritos, right here in our own land, they're tools of war and of occupation.
Thank you, sir. Madam Secretary, can I have the speakers on item B, please? Item B.
Item B? How many do we have?
May I have the...
We have 7 cards for item B.
Yes.
We have Michael Novick, Hamid Khan, Jamie Garcia, Mr. Herman, Akil, Jeremy Tramer, and Reverend Evan Bunch.
Mr. Novick, thank you, sir.
Yeah, so obviously 1A, 1B, 1C are part of a package. You're going to approve the policy guidelines, and then you're going to accept the equipment, buy the equipment, and accept the donation of the software to operate the equipment. I want to point out what it says here. For the benefit of the Los Angeles Police Department, it's set forth. For the benefit of the Los Angeles Police Department, it's set forth. For the benefit of the Los Angeles Police Department, it's set forth. What about the benefit of the people of Los Angeles? That's supposed to be your concern, not the benefit of the LAPD. This is, Kay said, a police state. This is exactly the definition of a police state. The city council did not approve any money for this in their budget for the LAPD, despite the fact they approve an enormous budget for the LAPD. So what you're doing an underrun around the civilian authorities of the city and the elected government of the city by saying you're going to accept a donation from the LA Police Foundation or maybe from the Parker Foundation, I don't know which one it is, to fund this when there's no funding for it. That's the police running the city. That's a police state. When you talk about the basis for this program in the department's report that you haven't accepted yet, and I hope you don't, the operations for this comes out of the Special Weapons and Tactics Division, meaning it's militarized policing, and it comes out of the so-called Anti-Terrorist Division, meaning it's counterinsurgency policing. So I think that you're completely derelict in your duty of defending the benefits of the people of the state of Los Angeles in favor of defending the benefits of the police state of Los Angeles and the police department of Los Angeles. And you should reject this funding, you should cancel the program, and you should eliminate the software.
Mr. Khan, Mr. Khan.
I think the bigger question is that when the drones did come and now they're talking about getting this money and donations and all of that, in 2014, Eileen Decker, who's the president of the Police Commission, was the deputy mayor of Homeland Security and Public Safety herself for Garcetti. So when people organized and shut down and kept the drones grounded for 3.5 years, Eileen Decker kept on dodging us because we played this whole email game. And then she had us meet with Thalia Polykranis. We still remember the names, and some other fellow who came and met with us. And they told us, they exactly told us that the mayor is very serious about public opinion about these issues. The former chief of the police, Beck, had said, and I quote at the time in 2014, that I will not sacrifice public trust for a piece of equipment. This is exactly his quote right? So now how do they measure public trust? How do they gauge public trust when it comes down to that? You go out and you survey people. You go out and you talk to people. People come to you and they send you emails, they send you social media messages, and they come and speak in this forum. Overwhelmingly, over and over and over again, the people have rejected this technology. The people have categorically said no to this technology. People have spoken about their experiences in Pakistan, in Palestine, in various other places. People have spoken about their experiences with the ghetto bird in South Central Los Angeles, on the east side of LA as well. The impact, the emotional trauma of the ghetto bird, the fear of the ghetto bird, and now you're going to have these drones that are going to be hovering around. And it's not going to be like this selective use of drones, because we know what happened with SWAT. We know what happened with SWAT, which started back in the 1960s, and by 2011, 84% of low-level warrants were being delivered by SWAT, where people were dying, kids were being asphyxiated because of smoke bombs and all. So
Thank
this
you,
is
sir.
all a charade, and you should just...
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen. Ms. Garcia, you're next, ma'am. Ladies and gentlemen who are standing, I'd ask you to sit down, and members of the department who are here who are on latter items on the agenda, if you could make some seats available for members of the public, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. There are plenty of seats. Thank you. Thank you. Members of the public, please have a seat. Thank you. Thank you. They can sit wherever there's empty seating. Thank you. Ms. Garcia?
It should always be for the public, the front row. Why should it be for the police?
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Ms. Garcia, the floor is yours, ma'am.
So another demonstration of people power, that we actually have to come into rooms and demand respect, demand, to be seen. So, and I want to speak about this people power and constantly how this commission, how LAPD continues to try to ignore what we move. Right? So what's interesting about 2014 and all the organizing we did and the 3,000 petition signatures that we got as well, so we actually went above and beyond what you're capable of doing, that the drones were actually destroyed. The Dragonflyer X6 drones, they were destroyed. But did LAPD want to tell the community? Did LAPD want to let us know that all that organizing actually moved LAPD? Just like they didn't want to tell us about the chronic offender bulletins. Just like you secretly, stopped the program because of all our continuous organizing. So I want to demonstrate again how there is no value. We are not valued as people, valued in what the work that we do that goes above and beyond what you even do when you claim to serve us, right? So let's let that be clear. And then I want to talk about this architecture of surveillance. It seems like you constantly, maybe want to keep track with, basically having this panoptic view of who we are. And drones just adds to it. It adds to that collection of data, your data retention policy. What's your data sharing policy? And again, let's go back to facial recognition. We need to have an explanation. And maybe in this gang audit that you did, you can talk about the facial recognition training that happens. Because again, it's in the documentation, it was received through a public records request, but we seem not to talk about it, right? And then so, let's talk about Sandra. Let's talk about all you all, right? This is what state-sanctioned violence is. When we talk about it and people are like, what does that mean? It means that you all approve of the violence of LAPD. You all approve of militarized equipment coming into our communities to resolve conflict. You are just as violent as LAPD. This is blood on your hands.
Thank you, ma'am.
And you know what? Cynthia McLean Hill was the only one that had the courage to understand that the community did not approve
Garcia,
and actually said
there are
something.
other speakers,
Again,
ma'am.
it's not polite, Eileen. You have to understand
Garcia.
we will not be polite. And your demands
if you
are
won't
falling on
yield the
deaf
floor,
ears,
I'll
just
have to
like
ask you to
our
leave the
demands are
meeting.
falling on your deaf ears.
Thank you. Mr. Herman, you're next, sir.
thank you for the corruption, Sandra Figueroa Villa. Not reporting your findings. But it's no shock. Cohen versus the United States. Fuck the draft. No, fuck the drone and laser SWAT weapons. Yeah, let me shock you with a 213-330-9803, Mr. Kenny from Homeland Security. As he spoke with me, he mentioned, it's called 09-505-19 for the record. And he said, what nig has done anything right? And so it begins. We don't want the drones. We don't want small, unarmed, unmanaged aerial systems deployment in any community, especially in our fucking Jewish community where we put men on Christmas trees and celebrate. Shut it down. Shut it down. Shooting the fucking drone, shooting the car, that's shooting the nigs. But that's what Brandenburg versus Ohio is all about. First Amendment and free speech. And we got to have a lot more of them when we cite court cases under 09-505-29 as it begins. And we know that you, Miss Decker, were up in Washington before Donald Trump dumped you back to this small little city to engage in the corruption with Miss Villa down there, who's been very quiet lately. I believe a cat bit her tongue. Meow. And I'm glad to see that the Jew boy up there is no longer participating.
Mr. Herman, you're clearly off topic, sir.
No, I'm talking about the drone.
All right, your
and
time
as
is
I
now
said,
up, sir.
shut it
Thank
down,
you.
shut it down.
I believe the next speaker, I'm not sure if I wrote it down correctly. What? I missed the name, I think.
It says Akhil,
Akhil.
A-K-H-I-L.
My apologies. Sir?
Today, like probably most people in this room, I'm thinking about the absolute callousness and cowardice and lack of any kind of empathy that you all have for black people. And specifically, black people who are struggling with mental health. Because one of the things I'm thinking about when it comes to mental health is the LAPD PATH program. PATH is P-A-T-H-E, and that stands for Providing Alternatives to Hinder Extremism. When black people and Muslims and people of color and Arabs and all other intersections, when they have mental health issues, it's extremism. And they are, what comes next is the brutal hand of the state and violence. When white people struggle with mental health or people with money, suddenly it's a question of care.
Can you please bring it back to the topic?
I'm coming back to that.
Thank you.
When we talk about drones and you're talking about them as being a type of de-escalation, I want to think about how the constant trauma of your existing and policing communities exacerbates normal human variance with mental health. And then the solution you have to that is to send a flying, buzzing, armed camera into their houses. You were talking about how the new drone has the capabilities of flying inside. How is that a de-escalation, especially for people with mental health? That's right. How is that showing care? What that is keeping yourself safe while triggering an already difficult moment that they're having. And honestly, I don't put it past you all to put guns, tasers, etc. on those drones in the nearby future, because already I see none of you do anything to prevent anything. So what is happening is actually a continuing preying on people with mental health. And the context for that is Trump saying that he's starting to...
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Mr. Trainer, you're next, sir. Thank you. Sir.
All of your policies about drones are irrelevant because all of your policies are irrelevant. Because there's no consequences for breaking rules. The officers who killed Grishario Mack were ruled out of policy and nothing happened. So if officers violating policy by using guns to kill civilians goes ignored by Chief Moore, why would officers violating policy by using drones to kill civilians be treated any differently by Chief Moore? Let alone drones violating policy in non-lethal ways. So the LAPD's drone policies are not just garbage, but they're completely meaningless. But Chief Moore, in July, I came here and asked you if these drones would be weaponized, and you said no. Is that correct?
Sir.
He
under
answered. He
the
said, we
Brown
don't
Act-
answer. You can go on YouTube. He literally answered and said, no, they will not be weaponized. So someone mirror that video before they take it down. And, you know, as the public, as Gina said, 6 out of 1,100 LA residents responded to a poll saying they want drones. That's less than 3%. You must have pretty strong feelings to go against, 97+% of the population. I was going to ask how you feel about it, but apparently you've created a new policy that you're not allowed to answer questions. However, we know you like to violate your own policies, so I'm going to ask anyways. Do you have any thoughts on this 3% of the public supporting your drones?
Sir, you're aware under the Brown Act, we're not allowed to engage in conversations during this time except for administrative matters.
Anyone? Anyone have any thoughts? No one has any thoughts. Gotcha.
Thank you, sir. Reverend Bunch, you're next, sir.
Steve seems to reply to us whenever he fucking wants to.
I also signed up to talk about 1A as well. But for some reason I was taken off of that to not speak. But I was sitting there trying to figure out what to say. But it's just so painstakingly clear that you don't care what the community says.
Right.
And then, but if I come up here and cuss all of you all out,
That gets attention.
you all would use whatever policy you want and exit the room. And so it just comes to question, what does it take for you all to listen to the community? I mean, does it take us giving you millions of dollars in some back room somewhere like Sandra Figueroa Villa and packing her pockets with damn money?
Probably.
Does it take us? I mean, you all have your own funding source. The police, whoever Parker Foundation on here says the police foundation is funding things for y'all without any type of democratic process. And then you want to invest in these words like trust and community collaboration. You have really built up a apparatus of you versus us. And you sit here. You know, Chief Moore said that he wasn't going to put a police camera in my neighborhood. Last time I was here. Guess what's there now?
Why didn't he put it in the white neighborhood?
Thank
But
you,
you
sir.
heard the statistic. You heard that
Your
no
time's
one
up.
wants the
If you'd like to come back on the next matter, I can put your card down for that.
But when are you going to answer
Sir.
the question from the community that no one wanted it, but yet you all approved it?
Sir, please have a seat, and we're going to move on to public comment on item C. Madam Secretary, who are the speakers who put in for number C?
Because that
We have 6
that is
cards.
the problem. That is the problem.
Can you please give me the names? We have. Sir, please have a seat.
Because having
Michael
this process and not including the public into the process,
sir,
that's a
please
that's a
have a
wrong
seat.
process.
Sir, If you won't have a seat, you're disrupting the meeting,
If-
and I'll have to ask you to leave.
If thousands of people have already spoken
Sir?
about this, what are you
Sir?
going to do about it?
Sir, I'm asking you to please have a seat, or I'll have to ask you to leave the meeting.
And this is what created movements.
Sir,
This is why Rosa Parks sat down,
sir,
because people like you told her to get off of the bus.
sir.
But we're not getting off of the bus.
Reverend, I've asked you several times to please have a seat. There are a number of other people
And yes,
who've
we
put
are,
in
and
public
yes, we are
comment
coming
cards.
for y'all.
Please have a seat, or you need to leave the meeting.
Please listen to us.
Okay. Have a seat, sir. Thank you. Who are the 6 speakers on item C?
The 6 speakers are Michael Novick, Paula Miner, Hamid Khan, Jamie Garcia, Mr. Herman, and Reverend.
Mr. Novick, sir.
You need to call Justice's name.
Jesus.
Put Jesus on there.
I'll point out that I asked you, is he one of the people speaking for 1C, and you didn't even bother to check, but he was, and he should have just let him continue speaking.
That's right.
So this is yet another measure relative to the drones. This is 1C, and we're accepting a donation of computer software from Measure Aerial Intelligence to support the drones for the benefit of the LA Police Department. So this is an example of a kickback. You're buying the drone from them, they're going to throw in a little sweetener of free software because they know you're going to buy more drones that will be run with the same software. This is like the crack dealer who gives you the first taste for free and then you're hooked on the crack. It's like Johnson & Johnson and these other people gave you a little OxyContin and then you're hooked on fentanyl and you die. This is fatal. You're accepting a policy and you're accepting a software that's about the militarization of the police, further militarization of the police, further invasion of the privacy of the people of Los Angeles. You're violating the interests of the people of Los Angeles for the benefit of the Los Angeles Police Department. It's time for that to stop. It's time for you to put a stop to it because that's your responsibility. You're supposed to be the people overseeing the department, setting the policies, instead of having them write the policies, instead of having them buy the equipment with money they're getting from the Police Foundation, which one of your members is involved with. It's an ongoing conflict of interest, much larger than Sandra Figueroa Villas because it's permanent. It's getting around the funding process for the city. As I said before, you're accepting money, you're accepting donations, and you're letting them write the policies and put it into practice without the oversight of the people of the city. So I think you're derelicting your duty, and you shouldn't tell people to shut up here. You should get out of this building. You should go out in the community and hear what people think, and then maybe you'll wake up to what your responsibility is. But otherwise, you shouldn't even be on the police commission.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Miner?
Speaking on 1C, the $1,400 donation from Measure Aerial Intelligence Company is, I think, an example of linking mission creep, donations, no big contracts, and ultimately corruption. When you think about Mission Aerial Intelligence, we know they are a company that tries to sell what they call the transformative benefits of drone technology. We understand that LAPD is moving forward with drones. They make a donation of $1,400. Does LAPD, who gets more than half of the city budget, not have $1,400 to pay for software? We know this is a sham. This puts them in line to get a no-bid contract as this particular program expands. We saw this done before in the past with Mr. Soboroff and his cronies when they get in on pilot programs, they get in on demo programs, and then get awarded the no-bid contracts. And in light of Ms. Figueroa's unethical acceptance of money from Predpol, who was also a donor, who gave free services to get ready to be in line, and in light of the various conflicts of interest in the city of LA that are being investigated right now, those with the city attorney, those with DWP, we feel that these donations definitely need to be looked at in a different way. You know, we're talking about a drone program that nobody wanted, but what we're overlooking is the corruption that's happening, and our commission is part of it. These should be reviewed and audited by the city controller. The question is, how do these companies know what to donate? How do we know some other company might donate the same software for $1,200? It is a sham, it is a game, and it is leading to corruption, and the commission is aware of that.
Thank you. Mr. Khan? Mr. Khan, then Ms. Garcia.
Talking about donation, that the complicity and the corruption and the bribery of Sandra Figueroa was so rotten that the LA Times published 2 articles in the same day.
I saw that.
Not just 1, but 2.
I saw that.
Right? Which by itself, in a city like Los Angeles, of a paper that has that history of not being very supportive, of not being very supportive of community power. I mean, that it has to be super rotten. But what did she come back and say? I don't know if people remember that. That people in the audience are hateful.
Yes.
They are spiteful. They don't like me because my name is Silent Sandra, right? I mean, when you talk about families here, when you talk about, you know, families wailing, families just going through tragedy of
Mr.
their
Avalos,
loved ones
please
being murdered.
put the sign down. Thank you,
This
sir.
is what happens. That they call us spiteful and hateful as a result of that. When we speak truth, when we expose their corruption, we come back with research, we talk about the real thing, we expose the whole system of being corrupt. But yet at the same time, we are being hateful. We are being spiteful about that, right? Who's being hateful and who's being spiteful? You are being hateful, Shane. You are being spiteful, Eileen. You are being completely negligent, Dale Bonner. Because people have been speaking about this for the longest time. And what happens? Comes through one ear and goes out the other, because you all are programmed and oriented to respond in a particular way, as Soboroff told these USC students in his interview. That my top priority is the LAPD. He represents the interest of the LAPD. So let's get it very straight. This civilian oversight, this whole process of oversight is a sham. This man is going around telling the community that I don't give a fuck what the commission says about the killers of Grishario Mack. Right. Really? I mean, this is the audacity of this is what we look at. This is the spitefulness and the hatefulness that we see and we hear all the time. This is, you expect us, but we are not going anywhere. We know that this is a multi-generational thing, and our fight is for the abolition of this system.
Yeah.
Our fight is for the dismantlement of the system, and we will win. Next generation, next generation. So do the right thing. Do the right thing and reject this thing, and so say no to these drones.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Garcia?
Change the system. Change the system with big money like Soboroff doesn't run the system.
Sir, please stop shouting out. Ms. Garcia?
So, so I think it's important that we keep talking about these donations and we keep uplifting and letting folks know that we're not going to forget, what kind of corruption is going on in this commission. The fact that, even when we met with the mayor about these drones and we were, basically sitting in a meeting telling him why. And that's the other thing, because it's like, we always seem to get painted as some kind of fringe group. We're demanded to be polite. We're demanded to sit down. We're demanded to not hold our signs. We're demanded basically to give up our right to resist, right? Which is not happening, right? That's not going to happen no matter how many times you try to tell us to do that. So, Sandra was receiving city and county money. Unlike, I couldn't even keep track of how many millions, right? So we're meeting with the mayor. We're, doing all this advocacy work that people like Shane try to tell us to do, that it's important, this is how we get heard. But no wonder she's not saying no, because to go against the city or the county may risk your money. right? You're not going to get that money. So we look like this fringe group that just comes and shouts and is mad and is angry, but we have every right to be angry. We have every right to be angry. Let me tell you, Dale, what we actually did. It was a 50-page report. We did research by the community, understanding the legacy and what drones do, right? We had focus groups where we had promotoras ask, are they at war with us? And that's what they asked us. Are they at war with us, right? We did surveys. We did the 3,000 petitions. We held our own town hall and gave people plenty of time to take time off of work to attend, as opposed to this commission giving us 1 day notice. Who do you really serve? Give me a freaking break. We are saying no. Listen.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Herman? Mr. Herman, you're next, and then Reverend Bunch.
The way they act, they are the police department. LAPD, the strength, it's too large. They suck too much money
Mr. Herman.
out of taxpayers' money.
Start the clock on Mr. Herman, please.
Yep.
Thank you.
Fuck the draft. Fuck the drone. You heard the public's outcry why Sandra Figueroa was accepting bribery money and is involved with the FBI corruption scandal with City Hall and the DWP. How dare you? Such a great Christian. Yeah, money laundering. Go to Salesian High School. They'll show you how to lobby money. They're known for helping Jose Huizar in the FBI investigation. And let's use the MAI. What is MAI, Sandra? MAI doesn't stand for making additional income. It means measure aerial intelligence to keep Herman out of public meetings so he doesn't have to scrutinize people who are foolish and
Sir,
get
can
caught.
you bring it back to item C, please?
Well, I'm talking about the pilot program, ma'am. Homeland Security. We're going to invest money to put a little airplane in the sky to track people down, like the same way Homeland Security tracked me down at Grand Park on Friday a week ago, because they said I was involved in some terrorist activity, which simply is I tend to rant a lot about the drone system. And for some reason, the support of Homeland Security wanted to make sure I was safe and not taking a bullet to my head the way you insulted Wayne Spindler when you send the Highway Patrol to point a drone at the back of his head. So I know I'm not crazy. I think Sandra Figueroa is crazy, because when you're accepting a donation on behalf of software, intelligence, drones, it all comes back to one organization. That is, fuck the drone.
Reverend?
I think it's also important to point out that this drone paradigm started in the federal government during the so-called war on terror. That's where your reports of how drones operate should come from. When drones began as a they began as a weaponized system. They began without no weapons. That's how they started. They went into communities and villages and killed off civilians in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, and going on today. Okay? And Barack Obama helped to usher that through.
It was mass killing.
And then when I got out of the military in 2014, where did I see that same weaponry? On the streets of Ferguson, Missouri. So you can sit here and act like what we are saying is some kind of, we're just making stuff up, or we're in some type of psychological purgatory, or we're just making this thing up. But these are real life happenings. Right. And Sandra Figueroa Villa, you accepting that money is the same way that they're going to keep you quiet while they murder and kill us. The same way Judas accepted that money, one of Jesus' best friends. Best friends. And all it took was a few pieces of silver to shut him up.
Look at him while he talks.
while they murdered him publicly on an old rugged cross. And you're putting your Latin brothers and sisters on an old rugged cross when you accept millions of dollars. And you sit there meeting after meeting, and guess what you do? You are now known as Silent Sandra Figueroa Villa. But what we should be calling you is Judas. It's in that same spirit that you're operating today. And y'all need to go fuck yourselves.
Sir. Members of the commission, that concludes public comment on A, B, and C. With respect to item A, there's a recommendation for the board to improve the department's report. Is there a motion?
I'll move.
Moved by Mr. Bonner, seconded by Commissioner Goldsmith. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? None. The motion, the recommendation passes 5-0. With respect to item 1B, the recommendation for the board is to approve the department's report and accept the donation. I will say, with respect to on the agenda, it's different than the underlying documents. It should be from the Parker Foundation and equipment instead of money. With those changes, is there a motion to approve the department's report and accept the donation?
Sure, so moved.
Mr. Soberoff moves it. Second? Second. By Commissioner Goldsmith. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? None. It passes 5-0. With respect to item C, the recommendation for board action is to approve the department's report and accept the donation. Is there a motion?
So moved.
And Commissioner Figueroa Villa second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It passes 5. All opposed? It passes 5-0. Thank you. Moving on to thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Moving on to item D on the agenda. And item D is a donation of equipment in the amount of $17,765. Captain Tibbet, is Captain Tibbet here? Sir, I see you're on the agenda for a few items, if you wouldn't mind having a seat. Commissioners, do you have questions on this particular donation?
I don't.
No? Captain Tibbet, can you just briefly give an overview of the nature of this proposed donation, what it will be used for, and why it is needed?
Okay, so the item number D, is that the one that you would like to start off with?
Yes, that's what we're up to, sir.
Thank you. So there's a amount of $17,765 that is being requested from the Police Foundation. It is equipment for sniper weapon systems, and it would enhance their effectiveness during high-risk missions. It would purchase ballistic weather meters and ranges, finders, and also safety goggles for those officers that work in that position for SWAT. Rifle slings and stabilizers would also be part of it. Basically, part of it, they're kind of like computer systems that attach to the rifle, and they measure the weather conditions and actually relay information related to the weather conditions as it relates to shooting at a further distance.
Very well. Madam Secretary, are there public comment cards on item D? Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner has a question.
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to also to understand, generally speaking, how much of what you were just describing is enhanced equipment and technology in any way, or are you replenishing existing equipment that's just run its useful course, or how would you characterize the nature of the investments you're proposing?
It is both. It is enhanced technology, but it is also at the same time replacement of older equipment. We have 24 different snipers. They do training on a regular basis, and so the equipment that they currently have has been used and beyond its lifespan in some cases, and so some of it is to upgrade and to replace as well.
But with regard to the new, it's not changing, making any operational changes. It's simply enhancing the capabilities of what they're currently doing.
Yes, that is it. It's just enhancing the capabilities.
Thank you.
Any other questions from members of the commission?
Nope.
Nope. How many public comment cards do we have on item D?
We have 3.
We have three.
Oh, I apologize.
I think it's very disrespectful to them for us to have to sit through all of this before they get to speak. So if you have any humanity in you, you will say that they're sitting here for almost 2 hours.
Dr. Abdullah.
Can they speak now instead of having to go through all of your donations?
Dr. Abdullah.
Your son was killed by LAPD.
Dr. Abdullah.
So you let them speak.
Dr. Abdullah, let me finish this item. I will come speak to you regarding that. Ma'am, I was not aware that the family was coming today. I was not informed.
Everybody knew. Everybody
I didn't know.
Everybody knew.
Ma'am, please have a seat.
He knows. Everybody knows.
The members of the commission did not know. Please have a seat. Ma'am, please have a seat. Ma'am, please have a seat. Everyone, please have a seat. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point, you're all disrupting this meeting.
Yes.
We will recess.
Humanity. Why don't you just have some humanity and invite them to come say what
Ma'am, I was not we're in the middle of a presentation. Ladies and gentlemen. Very well. We cannot. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, can you let me speak to you for one moment? For one moment. Dr. Abdullah. Dr. Abdullah, I was not given advance notice that the Mack family was coming today. One moment. We are in the middle of a presentation. They can go next. They can go next.
Just said they're going next.
I'm
Sit
in
down.
the middle. Ladies and gentlemen, if you do not sit down, we will recess the meeting and no one will get a chance to speak. Please. Please. Please.
Perhaps we should be addressing the family directly.
Ladies
Would you like
and
to go next as soon as we finish this item? Okay, we're happy to do that.
Great.
Please, we're in the middle of a meeting. I'm asking you to kindly sit down. Had I been given advance notice, I would have made that accommodation. Please, I didn't know they were here. So please have a seat. Please have a seat. Everyone, please have a seat. Thank you. How many public comment cards were there on item D?
6 cards. We have Michael Novick, Mr. Herman, Adam Smith, Reverend Evan Bunch, Zach Sherwin, and Clint.
Mr. Novick? Mr. Novick? That's a pass. Mr. Herman?
Can you pass Mr. Herman, please, so the family can speak? Please put the family first. Thank you.
Mr. Smith? Clint or Mr. Sherman? Clint? Very well. Is there a motion? The recommendation is to review the department's report and approve for transmittal to the mayor and city council for acceptance.
So moved.
Okay. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. It passes 5-0. Thank you. The Mack family, my apologies. I did not know that you were coming today. May I ask whoever is going to speak, or if multiple individuals are going to speak, ma'am, would you mind taking the podium if you'd feel more comfortable having a seat? Officers, would you mind clearing the table? I'd appreciate it. Ma'am, would you? Would you like to have a seat up front and a microphone so everyone can hear you? Ma'am, please have a seat. And ladies and gentlemen, I just asked one person to sit with her. Thank you very much.
She is
I understand.
in extreme grief and trauma.
I don't know whether she wants.
Come on, baby.
Thank you,
Take your
ma'am.
time.
Jesus, hear my prayer, dear God.
And ma'am, would you mind moving the microphone a little closer so we can all hear Ms. Mack? Thank you. Thank you.
It is obvious to me, Chief Moore, that you're not a man of God. And the reason why I'm saying that is because I've heard how you went into the had meetings with the clergymen, and how you spoken and told everybody about how the decision to fire the officers is in your hands, and you feel as if you don't want to fire them. But if you're a man of God, and if you're a man of integrity, you'll fire those officers. Because the fact of the matter is that you're not God, sir. You don't have no say about what the Lord says. And in my belief in Jesus, I walk by faith and not by sight, sir. If you think that you got the power over God and over my Lord and my Savior, you're wrong, sir. Don't live with that in your mind and your heart to think that you are superior over our Lord and our Savior. Because when you lay down at night, I pray that God have mercy on you and your family, because you never know when your time is going to come. But I pray that you don't go to your grave protecting these murderers, Ryan Lee and Martin Roberts, whatever. I'm so distorted, I can't even say the name right. But God knows the name in which I'm calling on, the names in which I'm speaking on. Father God, in the name of Jesus, I pray that you create a heart, a clean heart, in Chief Morris' heart. Creating him, God, the will to do, to stand for the righteous. Because you don't have the power, sir. I'm a mother that's lost my child. I've lost my baby. This has traumatized my whole family. This has traumatized all the way from myself to my children, to my grandchildren, to my great grandson. My children and my grandchildren and myself shouldn't be afraid that if we're in trouble, I'm afraid to call y'all. Because I'm afraid they may recognize who I am and say, oh no, that's that mother that's going to fight, so we can't we can't go see what's going on with her because we don't know what's on her mind. But just know that I'm a God-fearing woman. And even though in my heart I may want to hate you, I may want to hate the officers that took my son's life, but God won't permit me to do that. He won't permit me to hate you. He won't permit me to have hatred in my heart. But I pray that he'll have mercy, that he'll put in you and create in you a clean heart to make the right decision, to change your mind. That's right. I don't have nothing against the whole LAPD. I don't have nothing against all of them. But the two officers that took my baby's life, don't let them put this department in shame, because that's what they're doing. As long as you don't fire them, they're putting your department in shame. Don't let your name go down as one of the worst chiefs ever been in history for not doing the right thing, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Mack.
I won't even call you Chief. I'll call you Michael, and it's very unfortunate we share the same last name. You can never be any kin of mine. The heart you have is very ugly, and I just pray that you pray on your knees every night, because like my mom said, you don't know when your day is coming or when your family's day is coming, so I'll leave it at that.
I'm Gashario's dad, and I just want to say that, first of all, I was listening to you speak on the drones, and it's bad enough we have killer cops. LA has become the killer cop capital of America, and led by Chief Moore, and he's a killer cop chief. And, you know, it's like Catherine said, it's not all LAPD, but when you don't do anything to the ones that are doing wrong, when you have cancer, you want to eradicate all of the cancer. And I can say to the police commission, in this incident on my son, that you came to a unanimous decision and found them out of policy, yet Chief Moore won't do anything about it. It's akin to saying a cancer patient goes to the doctor and says, you need to eradicate all this cancer, and then here comes someone like Chief Morris, no, leave those two in there. You know, they're not gonna bother anybody. I mean, you're giving, and then it's when you have cancer in the police force, and you've dubbed the killer cop police force in the nation, it's a bad rep. And we're in LA, Los Angeles, we're supposed to be more progressive. And I know you trying to hold up the status quo, but you're becoming like the Bull Connor of the 2019. Sheriff Bull Connor. We got a Bull Connor as the police chief of LAPD, and it's a shame. It's a shame, it's a shame. And now they're talking about putting killer drones out there with weapons on them. You can't even control the humans. The human killers, you can't control them. So I guess that'll be another excuse. We had a glitch when they shot all those people in the back. I mean, what is this? I can just imagine being gunned down or racially profiled by a damn drone. And I can only wait until the day that you're skinny dipping in your pool and one of those drones fly over and put you all over social media. Are the drones coming your way? Are they going to be in your backyards? I don't think so. We don't want them in our backyards either. And you need to listen to the people. You need to do something. You need to go down in history as doing the right thing. Without civil rights, there will be no peace. And we need some peace, and we need LAPD to be cleaned up. Who do we have to call? I mean, the police commission found them out of policy. You won't do anything. Jackie Lacey won't do anything. We need the feds down here. We need who? Kamala Harris, Maxine Waters. We need the feds and the FBI. They already raided City Hall. Now they need to raid LAPD. Something is wrong. Something is definitely wrong here. Something is wrong. You don't listen to us at all. We pay your salary. It's like having a maid come and clean your house or a babysitter come and kill your kids. We pay your salary. You don't protect and serve us. You protect and serve your own. And these other cops who sit by and watch, I know every officer in here then seen some assault and some dirt. Yet I know, just like any other gang, though, snitches get stitches. But you guys need to start speaking up and clean the swamp, drain the swamp.
Hello, you remember me. I wasn't wearing the collar. I want to first, I have something I want to give. Is this, because I don't want to run out of time, but I want to make sure. But that's something that I wrote, and it's entitled, Chief Moore, You're Not God. And the reason that I say this is that I've been at a couple of meetings, the African American Leadership meeting and the Van Ness Clergy Council meeting that I've been a part of for a number of years. And I dare say, when I have attended these meetings, I saw you, Chief Moore, as a much kinder and gentler and more open person. And I was really impressed, and for a split second, I started to believe that there was a possibility that you could be for the people. And then I brought up Mr. Mack's mother and that young man, and you switched. And you said, and the reason I'm here, I wanted to congratulate and to thank the commission for the decision that was made the last time I was here. I really did, but I never got a chance to do that because Chief Moore in his comments completely usurped any hope that I had of congratulating you, because he informed me, and I'm paraphrasing, that you all had been fired for your lack of experience in policing. Chief Moore, you said in both of those meetings that this commission, that you did not agree that those shots were out of policy. That's what you said. You also said the reason that you didn't agree with the commission was that because of their lack of experience in policing, that they did not have the capacity, and I'm paraphrasing, but this is what you said. They did not have the capacity to give the same kind of analysis that someone who was a police officer like yourself would. You also said that you don't have the capacity to fire these two police officers. You said that the only thing that you could do was to refer those two officers to a tribunal, and then you said that you would be the chief witness in favor of those officers, and how did I think they were going to decide? That is a direct quote. And so what I'm saying to you and what I'm saying to this commission, we have been here on many occasions, and I have seen you, Mr. Soboroff, you've had to take it on the chin. I've seen all of you have to take it on the chin. And then when you make the right decision, when there is an opportunity to join forces with the community and do good, there is one man standing in the way. And it should not be. Your responsibility and your role. I had to go do some research, Chief Moore, after hearing your comments. What I found out is that you were hired because you represent the civilian community, that you should not have policing experience, because you should be more capable of understanding what is appropriate and what is fair when police engage the community. That's your job. And you did your job. And I guess the thing that offends me the most, what offends me the most as a pastor, is that this family, this mother, appealed to you all in the black church and Christian church tradition. She said, do the right thing, not in your own name, not in her name, not in the name of her son, but in the name of Jesus Christ, which is representative by the very church that you invited me to come to. The very church that you invited me to come to. It is not right. It is not fair. And the last point that I would make, if it is in fact true, you also said that the only thing that they could do is fire you. That's what the commission can do, because they hired you and they can fire you, correct? That's what they can do. Well, I would just suggest that if you don't, make sure that these police officers, if I tried to usurp authority from God, he would fire me. And so I'm just saying this, Chief Moore, and I'm saying this to all of you. If I were a police officer and I had been involved in the murder of someone's son, even if I thought it was in policy, it was at least negligent. The fact that you shoot up a mall is negligent in every way. If I had integrity, if I was really about serving the community, I would resign. I would resign. I wouldn't take the community through this. I wouldn't take this mother through this. I wouldn't take the commission or even the chief. I would resign. And I close with this. We don't have the capacity to make people do the right thing who are convinced that they don't have to. But what we do have the capacity to do is to make sure wherever we go, whoever we engage, that we inform the people that there are people in leadership who refuse to do the right thing by the people. I don't want to have to come here and make another statement like this about black and brown folk. I don't want to have to see, my mother died yesterday. She died yesterday, but I'm here. And why am I here? I am here because she represents all that is good about living in this country. She was a slave. She was a sharecropper. She served as a domestic in white folks' homes. She had cancer 3 times, but was told because she was black, we don't give that kind of exotic treatment to black folk. She lost her twin child because we don't put black babies in incubators. We had to change her name at 80 because they did not keep record of black birth records at that in the time when she was born. And she lost her father-in-law to a lynching because white folks said he won a car, and white folks said ain't no nigga gonna drive a new car before us. So I am here because at some point, somebody has to take responsibility for all of what has been happening to black people in this country. And it has not stopped. She would have me here. She would have me here. There is nothing else that she would rather me do, because she understands the significance of speaking truth to power. That's right. I don't have, like this mother said, I can't hate any of you. I can't. And I have to believe that you have the capacity to change. The day that I think that people can't change is the day that I hang up my shingle. I believe that all people can change. And my expectation is that somebody would see what is happening in society. This is a microcosm of what is happening all over the world. And when you step into leadership, you have to be willing. You have to be willing to do the right thing. Now, let's not be confused. While I am a preacher, I also have a doctorate from the Seoul School of Public Policy at USC. So I understand police policy.
Come on, Pastor.
I understand it. And I know that what I've been hearing day in and day out when I come to these meetings, in no way will ever arrive at an equitable police system. In no way. And even, Chief, if you were the best man on the planet, unless all of those who are involved who sit in leadership are willing to wrestle with the people that they are supposed to protect and to serve and to hear the things that they have to say, it's never going to get any better. When will the killing end? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to return to our regular agenda. Is that all?
This is the final comment. We need to deliver something to the chief, so if you'll permit me that time.
Give it to the officer, thank you.
I'll do that. Chief Moore, I need to address you directly.
I'm sorry, ma'am. Did you put in a comment card? I'm going to put you on the 2-minute clock, okay?
That's fine.
All right.
My name is Tabitha, and I'm here along with many of the people who are in the room to deliver to you, Chief Moore, over 6,000 signatures of petition. Demanding that you fire officers Martin Robles and Ryan Lee. You yourself know, because you sat in this room in the same time that we did, that this police commission, which is supposed to be a civilian oversight body, made an unbelievable decision, a rare decision to find those fatal shots out of policy. So it is an important question to ask if there is any veracity to the purposes of this commission. When you can look at officers who have murdered a black man in public space who's experiencing a mental health episode when what he needed was treatment and support, they murdered him. You have to ask yourself, can officers do this with impunity? In the context of a society, as all of you have given oath toward, that is striving to build a democracy. You cannot have arbitrary police power that is unchecked in a democracy. And if you do nothing but ignore the findings of this commission, you are endorsing anti-blackness. You're endorsing the dehumanization and murder of people who struggle with mental illness, and you are completely disregarding the humanity of every family member sitting in this room. So what I'm asking of you is to pay attention to the over 6,000 people who have spoken and said your policies need to mean something. When someone is found out of policy, you, sir, have a right to do something. You have an obligation, in fact, to do something. Do not turn away in cowardice. Do not turn away because you plan to protect those who've murdered Grishario Mack. Please exercise your obligation to do what is right and ensure that we can
Ma'am, please give the records to the officer so we can proceed with the meeting, ma'am. Ma'am, thank you very much. Thank you. Ma'am, please give it to the officer. Thank you very much. Ma'am, thank you. Ma'am, Tabitha? Ma'am, please, your time is up. Can you please have a seat, ma'am? Thank you very much. No, ma'am. Ma'am, he's received it. thank you. He needs to review the materials. Ma'am, please have a seat. Otherwise, you're disrupting the meeting. Ma'am, you're now disrupting the meeting. Ma'am, you're disrupting the meeting. I now need you to ask you to leave the meeting, please. Ma'am, you need to leave the meeting. Ma'am, please. Ma'am, you need to leave the meeting. Ma'am. Ma'am. All right. We're going to recess into closed session at this time. We'll return, and the room will need to be cleared of all the people standing. Thank you very much.
It is our duty to fight for freedom. It is our duty to win. It is our duty to win. We must love and protect and respect one another. We must love and protect and respect one another. We have nothing to lose but our chances. We have nothing to lose but our chances. It is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to fight for our freedom. It
The Board of Police Commissioners has concluded its work in closed session. We are back in open session. In closed session, item number 4A1 was discussed and the chief's recommendations were unanimously adopted. In closed session, item number 4A2 was discussed and the chief's recommendations were unanimously adopted. We are now back to our agenda item.
On item 1E.
Yes. How many cards do we have? On 1E, we have
Captain?
2 cards.
Well, the room's been cleared. Are those individuals here?
No, ma'am.
All right. 1E. Are there commissioner questions regarding 1E?
On the question center, no.
Captain, can you just give a brief overview of the what you're requesting for here and the reasons why it's
Yes.
necessary? Thank you.
Captain Jonathan Tippett, Commanding Officer of Metropolitan Division, and the request is for $170,000 from the Amundsen Foundation. And basically, the pavement surrounding the Equestrian Center needs to be replaced. It hasn't been replaced in 30 years. It has gone through some significant times with all the heavy equipment and the mounted horses and the activities that they have. The 3 attempts have been made to get this funded by the city budget, and it has not. And so we have the Amundsen Foundation requesting to do that for us. It is going to cost approximately $145,000 based on the bid, and there's also $25,000 to assist with follow-up, which is required about 3 to 5 years to make it last a longer amount of time.
Very good. Thank you, Captain. Any further questions, commissioners? Commissioner Bonner, did you have something?
No, I didn't really have a question, more an observation, if I'm understanding this correctly, that there isn't a sustainable or reliable, what you might think of as an O&M or operations and maintenance kind of budget that would accommodate this in the normal course. In other words, the city, you had the asset, but there's not a standing budget to maintain it to the level that's required.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none. Is there a motion? The recommendation is to review the department's report and approve for transmittal to the mayor and city council for acceptance.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Third.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? It passes 5-0. Moving on then to item 1F, which again, Captain, is under your charge, I understand. And this is a monetary donation of approximately just over $12,000 for tactical equipment. Again, Captain, can you give an overview and an explanation as to what will be purchased and why it is needed by the department?
Yes, I will. It's about $12,573 that we're asking to accept from the LA Police Foundation. It is to purchase dive computers, transmitters, scuba dive masks, weights, gloves, wetsuits, and other equipment. Currently in that budget, we have about $10,000 to support the dive unit, which includes the tactical waterborne, which is the SWAT side of it. And so some of this equipment has to do with, to enhance our capabilities, including 5 dive computers that are going to be purchased, and also for the safety and the tactical operations and the training that they do as well.
Very good. I do have a question regarding the computers, and I know that there are a large number of people working on upgrading technology for the department, and I just want to be sure that every purchase that's being made that is technologically based is consistent with the overall, I don't know, master plan or interoperability of the broader objectives that are being sought. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes, it is.
So everything's interoperable, I suppose is the right word.
That is correct.
Okay, very
Yes.
good. Questions, colleagues, commissioners?
Mine's just more of an background question. Is where does this team or this cadre, where do they deploy? I mean, and
They're out of Metropolitan Division. They're SWAT team members.
no, what I mean is, if I'm and I could be misunderstanding what they do, but my understanding is they work in the water, essentially.
So they do not work permanently in the water. What they are is out of the SWAT team out of Metropolitan Division, which is stationed on Temple Street. And they have their dive operation and training sessions over at the port. We also have some individuals that go out of the Harbor Division, which is closer to the waters, and we have our boats and equipment over there. And most of the training that they do is over on that side of the city.
But in terms of incidents that they may respond to, what I'm pointing out is that in the city of Los Angeles, the jurisdictional, in the city, we're not by the beach, so to speak. We're not. I mean, what I'm asking is, are there incidents that occur in? I could imagine LA River. I could imagine Harbor, as you just described. But that's what I mean. It's just give me a flavor of what kinds of incidents jurisdictionally might they respond to.
Okay, so they respond to a wide variety of incidents, including rescues. There's currently a request for some of our dive unit to go out to Santa Barbara to assist with some of the investigation over there. They've had submerged vehicles in the waters down at the port. They have done searches for individuals, searching for bodies within lakes or other areas for missing persons. So they do a significant amount of searches every year.
Excellent. Exactly what
throughout the city.
That's right. What I thought. Thank you.
Other questions? Seeing none, is there a motion? The recommendation is to approve the department's report and accept the donation.
So moved. Oh.
Second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It passes 5-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Unless, my colleagues, if you have any objection, I thought we just continue on the donations and then go to the reports. Okay. The next donation then would be agenda item 1I, which is relative to a monetary donation, the amount of approximately $5.3 million from the Police Foundation for IT technology projects for the department.
And Commissioner, we are trying to find Commander John McMahon right now.
Oh, very well. We'll move on to the other donations.
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry, I did catch you off guard in moving ahead. I'm going to skip.
Here he is, blocking in.
Perfect timing.
Thank you.
Oh, big.
That's be perfect timing, Commander. Mr. Marks?
Good afternoon,
Mr.
Commissioners. I'm glad I have perfect timing. Commander John McMahon, Information Technology Group. To my left is Mr. Jeff New, President of the Los Angeles Police Foundation, and to my right is the department's Chief Technology Advisor, Mr. Peter Marks. Thank you for hearing this matter. I just want to address why we're asking for this particular acceptance of this grant. The department is currently undertaking the development of a comprehensive information technology strategic plan, a plan that has identified a list of key initiatives and priorities that seek to modernize our technological capability and mobilize our workforce through the development of versatile applications, elegantly designed interfaces, and improved data storage. These improvements will relieve field personnel of current archaic administrative processes and obligations that are cumbersome, redundant, and ineffective. Updating our technology capabilities will improve our officer morale and bolster administrative efficiencies, which will result in decreased time spent inside stations doing administrative work and result in increased problem solving and improved relationship building within our communities. Despite the city's continued fiscal support that has resulted in continual budgetary increases each year, several of our tech projects and current information technology needs remain unfunded or partially funded. Thanks to the generosity of the Los Angeles Police Foundation, the department has sought and is now asking this board to accept the donation to purchase goods and services identified in 6 different technology projects and 2 equipment requests that will serve to jumpstart our technological modernization. These projects include Wi-Fi at all area stations, in addition to 2 training facilities in Metro, a new department intranet website that will serve as a master LAPD application for all requests, services, and information, giving officers one particular site to go to get the information they need, an updated crime and analysis mapping system, an updated computer-aided dispatch, which will give officers the ability to get crime information, dispatch information, and other information via their handheld mobile cell phones, freeing up officers so they're not tethered to their police cars. 1,800 long-term evolution modems to give better connectivity to our police cars, just as an interim solution as we build out a mobile platform. And the addition of 4 particular members to support an IT help staff team that will serve as, for lack of a better term, like a geek squad, to go out and provide real-time solutions and problem solving to the geographic stations, to police officers that need it, giving our aging desktop computer fleet. And then 2 additional separate equipment funding items that will serve as interim solutions to our aging desktop inventory. One is the use of a Samsung DeX system, which is a supplemental keyboard, mouse, and monitor to allow officers to use their cell phones as a CPU or a mobile computing platform. This will allow them to use computers when the desktop computers at the stations are being occupied or otherwise under repair. And then also, in addition, we've recently purchased through last fiscal year and this fiscal year roughly a little over 3,000 desktop computers that will replace our aging inventory. That will leave us roughly with about 2,000 computers that will be within the range of about 8 years. So there's still some computers out there that are still tremendously slow. We've received all kinds of complaints about excessively long boot up times and things of that nature. And the interim solution to that is to outfit these computers roughly around the 8-year range that aren't being replaced by the life cycle replacement with solid state drives and additional RAM chips to facilitate additional speed on some of those aging systems. These projects were all selected because they all address 3 particular needs. Number 1, they can all be quickly delivered with existing department staff. They're immediately visible to our patrol officers, and they will improve efficiency and morale, given one of the things that we've learned through some touring of the department is that one of the most consistent complaints we have gotten, I know the chief has gotten some of the complaints he got in his initial tour, is the repeated request for officers to improve technology. This particular grant, the funding through these products and services will go to an immediate needs that are not otherwise been able to be funded by the existing city budget. I'll look to you to anything to add?
That's right.
Would you like to say anything? Did I miss anything?
I think you covered it all. Yeah.
Okay. In that case, sorry, Mr. New, did you want to add anything?
No, I'm just here if there's any questions.
For questions. Okay. Commissioners, are there any questions that you'd like to ask? Mr. Sobro?
First of all, I want to thank Jeff and the Police Foundation for accommodating this program. This is the beginning, a substantial step forward in the chief's urgent request and things that he wanted to do in his term. And my question was of the chief. You have a program that's 7 times the cost of this. Why were these items a priority, and how does it fit into your next steps?
Thank you, Commissioners, and I echo your remarks to Mr. New and the entire Police Foundation board, as they have in this last year recognized that there is a number of unmet needs in the modernization and the needed updating of our technology. Not to labor on that, but in this last year, we've also, with the services of Mr. Marks, in concert with the leadership of Commander McMahon, developed a 5-year roadmap that does 3 things. It is a initial assessment, if you will, a survey, an evaluation of what our current infrastructure looks like, in IT infrastructure. It is not exhaustive. There's areas of it that it did not respond to and look at, such as the computers for the underwater dive unit. Those are little peripheral aspects of this organization that, but the survey, I am satisfied that it looks across the entire enterprise. It also identifies this 5-year roadmap as to a PERT chart, if you will, of what is needed to modernize and improve the efficiency of our operations and thereby increase the number and hours of time in which officers in the field will have to interact with the public, and reduce the amount of time that they spend on administrative and redundant functions that are paper-based and should be digitized. In that, the foundation has, for the last 6 months, been efforting outside of the department to identify funds and to raise interest in this. Today represents their first offering, if you will, to the organization. And what this represents, however, is no monetary transfer, but rather their willingness to take on specific carve-outs or programs that, as a department and as our Chief Information Officer for the City of Los Angeles believes, are appropriate for outsourcing, for lack of a better term. While the organization, working with under the leadership of Mayor Garcetti and the City Council and the entire elected city government, if you will, take on different IT modernization programs, such as the new computer-aided dispatch that is in its final renditions. This is a project, one of the 6 projects, that complements that new program well by extending it to an officer on a pilot basis, extending it on a basis of actually putting that new computer-aided dispatch program in the hands of an officer. This, as a reminder to this board, and for those of you that more recently arrival, the organization for the past 5 years has been efforting to establish what's called a connected cop program. And that is the effort to strategically shift IT so that officers in the field and wherever they're at, detectives as well, have access to information and technology systems and are not slaved to a desktop or to a MDC in a car or some other more traditional IT solution. So today, this is, I think, strikes the right balance of prioritization in regards to what has been provided to the city, to the department via the existing city budget. It also sets well for a demonstration to the foundation that the department can, and the city can, with philanthropic support, accelerate its adaptation and accelerate its acceptance and taking on the capabilities of more modern technology and improve public trust by improving the amount and time in which officers can spend interacting with the public rather than doing these basic mundane tasks. So it's a combination of those functions, and hopefully in that discussion, assurance to you that the organization will pay close attention to all 6 of these projects to ensure that they are properly designed and functional and serve the needs that they're intended. Some of them are more, frankly, equipment-based, but others are functional-based in the sense of needing to meet the needs of our users. And so it'll be, the organization is also forming focus groups that will work with the foundation and its contractors to identify those needs and what the systems need to accomplish by what's been set out in description, in a brief description before you.
Is that it, Mr. Soboroff?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions?
I had a couple of quick ones. Please.
I was just going to thank you as well for the creativity and the willingness.
Thank you.
I had a couple quick ones, or what I hope assume will be quick. This relates to the 6 items or 6 areas where you'll be making some investments. And with regard to number 3, are the cell phones that are referenced there, are those department issued phones? Or are there, so there's no officers will be using this technology on their personal devices?
No, right now we have a little over 7,000 cell phones are out deployed in the field. We intend to use the existing supplied cellular devices that are currently in use.
Is there a policy, by the way, on with regard? I recall some discussions earlier about situations where someone is using a personal device to capture some information that may be considered evidence or something. Is there a policy one way or the other as to the use of, if you're conducting department business, are you required to use department technology?
We have existing processes and policies in place that would touch just about every aspect on which a cellular device would be used. What is, like for example, for taking photographs, you've got to follow a certain procedure for taking photographs. Just recently, we've opened up the the 7,000 plus cell phones that are currently now out in use were just recently did not have functionality to take advantage of the camera app. The chief has now opened up that capability to use the cellular device for that purpose. But in terms of internet policies, there are things that are in place in different areas that aren't unique to the cell phone, but do address behavior at large that prevents.
But again, all relative to department-owned and issued devices,
Correct, yes.
right? Okay, yeah, thank you. And then with regard to number 5, this is implementing a new crime analysis and mapping system for CompStat and department personnel that will be accessible via mobile devices. And I think I may understand generally what this, in this area, but I just want to note that for the chief probably in particular, we're having this ongoing discussion about the data-driven policing policies, and we have some reports coming back to the IG and so on. So I don't know enough about the area to know the degree to which any of this technology may have some application in an area that's still evolutionary to some degree. But I just appreciate some assurance that that to the degree there is any application for what's referenced here to those data-driven policies, that will finish the work on the guidelines and cleaning all of that up before we're deploying any of these resources for that purpose. Is that it?
That's absolutely right. What I spoke earlier about the functional needs, this is, for instance, this is one of those areas. This is a transition from an existing CompStat system, crime analysis system, that is now end of life cycle. The underlying software is no longer supported by the manufacturer. And so this is going to allow us to transition to the most current version of that underlying software. Any modifications, however, to it, in regards to the more current conversations about location-based strategies or such, will be responsive to the document that will be coming to this commission shortly in our response to the Inspector General's report as to data-driven systems and how those systems operate.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.
I have just a few questions, and I'm not sure who they should be addressed to, but the first one is I'd like to be sure, I know you have talked about a 5-year plan, but I'd like to understand a little more of your thinking of that plan related to ensuring what we're getting today will not be out of date, obsolete 5 years from now, or not interconnected and interoperable in some way. I've seen that happen in other instances with long-term technology plans. So I'd like to understand the way you're going about it to ensure that that doesn't happen and that we're good stewards of this money and this donation.
So maybe do you want to take it or should I?
I can start and you can fill in. So with Wi-Fi, we are purchasing the most latest, greatest access points. Wi-Fi generally has a regular long shelf life. I'm sure that at some point in the future, those devices will need to be upgraded and replaced, but given the nature of that particular type of hardware, we expect it to last a considerable amount of time. With respect to CAMs, this is an upgrade of an entirely new software platform. Any software has a shelf life to it, but this is one that through licensing, we continue to expect to maintain and upgrade just as you would with any other software application, with no real big obligations for additional city funding past the initial licensing, unless there's a complete total overhaul and they redo the entire app, which is not foreseen through some of our discussions with the vendor. The CAD, the mobile device, this particular evolution of moving to the mobile device is the vendor's latest and greatest software. Again, another software package that too will see its life of updates as time moves forward. But what's particularly exciting about this particular investment is we believe this will get us off our dependency of the larger, heavier mobile desktop computers that are in black and whites and have always yielded somewhat of a safety concern to the officers. We believe the handheld device in conjunction with the Samsung DeX, which is just a real lightweight computer keyboard, lightweight display monitor, and a mouse is proving to be an excellent solution for other police departments throughout the country, and we expect that to follow suit. Not only it's safer, but it's also a cheaper solution moving forward.
On hardware, warranties, service contract, with the body cams, we got technology upgrade. We got 2 technology upgrades. Can you talk about those issues? And if for the hardware, not the software, but do you have any?
So the mobile phones, the LAPD provided phones come from the carrier, and as we continue our service, the carrier then keeps us up to date on the phones.
Okay, good.
And then with regards to the app is actually available through the Play Store. This funds the license payment, and it will continue to be upgraded through the app stores.
Good.
Could you move the microphone a little
sorry.
closer? Just
My
so we-
apology. Yeah.
Thank you.
I also have a cold, so yeah.
And I'm sorry, Commander, did you finish your answer to the question on the interoperability? I'm not sure we got through all the purchases.
Yeah.
Yes, we did get through
Okay.
all the purchases.
Terrific.
The last one, the last piece is really not so much as that was our short-term solution in terms of the solid-state drives. That's the latest, greatest type of hardware mechanism that's going to be placed in eight-year computers. That particular piece of equipment will outlive the computer.
Very good. Mr. Marks, did you want to add anything to the interoperability question, or?
Well, I think with regards to the long-term IT strategy plan, the overall goals are we would like to have the department move towards a more mobile, where information is delivered to and from officers wherever they are, whenever they need it. And in order for us, right now the department operates on very much of a desktop. Officers go to rooms, or we recreate an office inside of a car. And obviously all of us understand that with mobile, we're getting to a world where, in fact, actually we can be much more mobile. The apps and services, data and information can flow to and from officers, whether they're driving in a car, undercover, wherever it happens to be. And the IT strategic plan really envisions more of that. It envisions looking at things like governance, data governance, IT management, project governance, and it's a fairly comprehensive look at IT strategy from soup to nuts.
Very good, thank you. With respect to one of the matters, I see there's a selected vendor, Motorola. I just want to be sure that we're following all city rules, procedures, and not using any mechanism as a way to bypass that. Can you just address that for a moment, Commander? I want
Yes,
to be sure
Commissioner.
we're in compliance.
Each one of these projects that we've identified in this, that if I use an example, that if we were to fund these with existing city monies, we have contracting mechanisms for each one of these. You cited Motorola. Motorola is a unique example because we have what has been called a master services agreement. The purchases and our relationship with Motorola, with our CAD and radios and land mobile radio infrastructure is largely proprietary to what the department uses in its CAD software. So for us, they're the sole source provider, and it pretty much eliminates any need for us to, would not have obligated us to go out to bid for any one of these items that we're requesting.
Okay, very good. If you
Just one related question. Are there any city control agencies that have will have any role in approving or reviewing or evaluating what you're doing from the standpoint of the procurement or otherwise? I know sometimes, like at the state level, there's an entire bureaucracy that's been built to make sure that there's no department that buys a piece of technology without going through the Department of Information Technology.
Yeah.
Is there any such city control agency that's going to be in play here?
Couple things. Internally, we've in ITG, we've personally just stood up an audit group that's going to audit our internal mechanisms, including all purchases and procedures that we follow as we embark on some of these large expenditures. I recognize that's an in-house component. But the Inspector General, we're still subject to the Inspector General and how he sees how we conduct our day-to-day businesses and following through with some of our.
Yeah, what I'm making sure is when everything gets nailed down and buttoned down within the department, you have all those checks that you're referring to and so on. Is there yet any outside department or agency within the city structure that will nonetheless have to It's the part of the concern, I think, when one of Commissioner Decker's earlier questions was about the risk that by the time you get the technology, it's somewhat antiquated or so, we went through a period where we tried to make it very difficult to buy technology because there were a lot of failures in this area. So we make the process deliberately slow and methodical and cumbersome, and then you have the risk that was alluded to. So that's what I'm wondering. Can we be as agile as we need to be to carry through this is what I'm asking, or is there some additional hurdles outside the department that we'll be confronted with?
Go ahead.
We've been working closely with the Information Technology Agency, ITA, which is part of the city. And so, for example, on Wi-Fi, they're specifying the equipment, and they will inherit the equipment because it is their network, as an example. And I would say that it's very much they've been terrific to work with. They've responded to our request for agility with regards to this, and each one of these has been closely coordinated.
It also goes to the city council after us, correct?
Yes, it does.
There, okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
One more question. Speaking of city council, I know there have been numerous efforts, and I'm not sure, Chief, if you're the right person to address this or one of the individuals at the table, but I wonder if someone can speak to briefly the history of efforts to be able to include this in traditional city budget funding. As I said earlier today, I have been on the other side of the street during the budget sessions, and it's very, very challenging to meet the needs of every department in the city, and inevitably things get cut on the budget room floor, so to speak. But I think it's important that we all have, and that we state here today, some of the history and the efforts the department has undertaken to get the city to fund some of these measures, and perhaps why there have been these challenges.
So as a general manager, I submit a budget to this commission, and it's approved each year, as you know. That's then forwarded through to the mayor, and he, in this Mayor Garcetti and his predecessors, would then take my budget as well, a proposal, as well as each general manager, in an effort to make ends meet, comes up with a mayor's budget, and then goes through a process where it's formally adopted by the commission or by the city council, and then ultimately becomes the city's budget. There are elements in today's presentation that have been in, to my knowledge, at least the last, if not the last 2 or 3 iterations of our request for funding, in which the city has just been unable to make. The area of technology for the city is an increasing cost center. And talking with Mr. Ross, as well as just in my general understanding, when we look at body-worn video, digital in-car video, we look at the various systems that exist that are technology-driven, they are putting an increasing demand on city resources. And so as capabilities increase, so do costs. And what I am here today is to present is that the foundation, and the police foundation this last year, we have gone to the foundation to explain that circumstances. People look and say, why doesn't the department have updated computers in your cars, or high-speed LANs in the vehicles, or desktops, and so on and so forth? Why is the current record management system so far out of date? And what we've talked about is that the efforts of the organization and the city has been to migrate, improve, and modernize. However, we've also are a city that's gone through the worst economic slump in more than a decade, and even now, as we're still recovering, cannot make all ends meet. And so this is where the foundation's leadership said, well, we believe the philanthropic community can help. And for the department, what's important to me is that there's a balance, is that there's a role for philanthropic community, and I know the foundation is looking to the city, that there's a role for the city. And these are, there's the only aspects of today's request, for instance, in this model, is the iteration of the CAD, computer-aided dispatch, going out to the handheld. That is a new item that has come up in our assessment of working with the new CAD as it comes out in October, and its capability, that our officers said, of course we want that. And as we moved across the country, we saw demonstrations of it. And then when we came back to say, well, why didn't we ask that from Motorola to begin with? There was this matter of, well, how would we fund it? And so there are degradations, if you will, or variations of technology that we use as a means of being efficient and measured in how we use public funds. This allows us to to optimize areas through private funding that previously we couldn't. And Mr. Marks, I believe, has something to add.
Yeah. I was just going to say one thing, which is that the foundation has made it possible for us to do something which many people call innovation, but obviously innovation equals risk. And Commissioner Bonner, you mentioned that there's been failure in projects before. So some of these projects are very straightforward ones. We're going to do Wi-Fi. There's no chance of failure because Wi-Fi is well understood. It's something that we all need and use in our daily lives. The CAD handheld app is something new for officers to use, and we're going to use the foundation's efforts here to go out and try an app which is really quite a different experience for officers. Instead of carrying a large radio and relying upon an MDC in an automobile, it may all be delivered through an app on a cell phone. And it's an evolution in the possibilities and may change behavior. Similarly, the DEX workstations, where you can use the office applications like Word and Excel and all the rest of it on a smartphone with a keyboard, mouse, and monitor is something new. And if it works, both of those projects will reduce the city's required costs in the future. And so I don't want to say that we're experimenting, because these are known products that are widely used, but we are doing it within the context of the LAPD in this place, to say that if this does work, which means that there's a possibility it won't because people may not like it, but if it does work, then it will hopefully reduce what the city has to fund in the future on these specific projects.
These, just add one, these projects that we've selected also very much focus on one of our most significant strategic components, and that's mobility. By using the CAD handheld, for an example, that frees up officers that are on non-traditional vehicle patrols to access the same information as they would in a black and white, whether on bicycle, on foot, on a horse. What we frequently know and is experienced that when these types of officers deployed in that fashion need to do some computer work or run some people, they will request another black and white out of the field to come there to their location and do that work for them. So that's a considerable amount of efficiencies that will be gained by deploying this type of mobility.
Very good, thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, the recommendation for board action is that we review the department's report and approve for transmittal to the mayor and city council for acceptance. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? It passes 5-0. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks, guys.
Item J is up next, and I am recusing myself from this matter because I teach at Pepperdine Law School, so I'll be stepping out of the room for the duration of this item.
Oh. Dr. Purnell not joining us? Were there any commissioner questions before we?
No, not on this one.
Does anyone want to hear a presentation from?
No.
Okay. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time. And
Practice last night?
The
I did.
report.
Do you want to hear it?
No.
I'll do it in Chinese.
Okay.
No. So no
Any public comment on this matter?
We have none.
Oh.
Jeez, you really know how to make things move.
Where's my map? All right, can I have a motion to review the department's report and approve for transmittal to the mayor and city council for acceptance?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good.
4-0.
4-0. What's next? What else can I do?
Jeez, the door didn't even close. Call her Speedy Shane.
Thank you, Commissioner. Let's hit the other donations. Item K on the agenda, the department's request or report for a donation in the amount of $16,000 for the Transit Service Bureau Traffic Group. Are there commissioner questions on this item, by the way?
No.
Anyone? No commissioner question items. Is there a motion to, as recommended, approve the department's report and accept the donation?
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes 5-0. Thank you very much. The next one, item L, is the department's report related to a donation of over $9,000 relative to youth programs. And I should say, commissioners, if you haven't noticed, I asked our executive director, the city attorney, and the chief's office to work together on determining whether certain smaller level donations could be grouped together for us. And in this case, it's a lot of the youth programming, and you'll see while previously they were presented as individual agenda items, going forward, they're going to be presented in a group so that we can consider them together. Okay. So that's with respect to items L and M. So are there any questions from commissioners on agenda item L?
Well, first, just the question is there a threshold or something that came out of that conversation as to what can be?
So the individual items that are like donations of a like nature, such as youth programs or equipment, can be put together. And as long as the individual donations are below the amount, they can be clustered together.
What is the amount? That's, I mean, I missed.
Oh, it's around $17,000 now. That has to go to council. So those items will be separated out. If it's over, the individual donations over $17,000 will be separated out. But as long as they're smaller donations, they can be put together.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay. And as long as they are donations of a similar nature, such as here, it's for youth programming, food, activities, and events, as you can see. And by the way, I should ask the city attorney if I spoke on that in any way.
No, as far as I understand, that's correct.
Okay. So are there any questions on the procedure? Okay. Are there any questions regarding item L? Seeing no questions, is there a motion to approve the department's report and accept the donations as indicated?
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? 0. It passes unanimously. And item M as well is a group of donations totaling the amount of approximately $17,000. And these are, I put them in the category broadly of items related to department morale for the benefit of the officers and employees of the department. Any questions? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the department's report and accept the donations as indicated?
So moved.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 0. It passes 5-0. And now that we've finished with the donation portions, I think I'd like to make that motion that I indicated earlier to ask the Inspector General's office to conduct a review of the department's process and procedures regarding accepting and using donations, how the department uses it, if there's a way to improve the process at all, how to improve the oversight of the donations, including any recommendations for how the system can be approved, if at all. And I'd like to make that motion. Would there be a second for that?
Second.
Wait.
Question.
And now we have a motion and a second, and now discussion. Commissioner Bonner.
Okay. Well, what I want to just make sure from a scoping standpoint, what you get out sometimes depends on what you put in, right? And so I want to understand really what we're asking for. Is it purely procedural in nature, or is there any further, one of the issues that I would, or I don't know if even know that's an issue, but it's a topic that I'd be interested in understanding, is some of the geographic elements of donations as well. So we have, I think, some parts of the department that have the benefit of having either a larger or more engaged citizens advisory committee than other parts may have. So I'd be curious just to understand, particularly with regard to youth programs and some of those things of that nature, what the history has been as to where we've seen the most and potentially the fewest donations and things of that nature. But that's an evaluation of the donations themselves, or as in an aggregate matter, as opposed to the process. So just the question is, would your motion include any such review, or would it be limited to more to the process.
I'm not sure I entirely understand your question, but all process and procedures, including at the divisional level.
Yeah, I think what I'm
not sure I understand what
yeah,
you're
I think,
really asking.
and maybe because it is really a scoping issue. So, for example, what I'm asking is in terms of you could clearly see a situation where someone's maybe not following the procedure, and maybe you might say, yeah, they're following the procedure better in Southborough than they are in Valley. That may be a scenario. What I'm looking at is which divisions really receive the most donations, of what kind, from what source. We had some initial information provided along those lines, which was volumes of essentially raw data about, but it's a matter of, is the IG able to look at some of the information that was provided earlier and churn some of that data, and or were we simply looking more of something that's more of an audit of, has the procedure been properly followed?
So it's not my intention that this is an audit. It's about the quality of the process and procedures. Is there alternative language you'd like to offer to ensure it covers what you like? Because I'm open to that.
I don't know that in real time I could really do it justice. My point is that that there could be a set of questions about the process and is it working properly. I think what I'm suggesting is there's another set of issues that may not be IG review that really go to the other questions of where do we typically devote most of donated resources? Where do they normally
It's more
come
about,
from?
if I understand your question, it's more about, are we, the broad we, is the department using the generosity of donors in the best way? Is that what you're
That's one element. That's
fundamentally
a broad, probably a pretty broad statement of our characterization.
It's more the quality. Are we using are we placing the donations in the right place to achieve the most value? Is that
Yeah,
what
and
you're asking?
what I'm acknowledging also is that in some cases it's not necessarily a function of what the department wants. As I mentioned, as I understand it, in some cases
what
for
the
those
donors-
donations that come from a community group, a community-based group that may organize, and you may say that in some part of the city there's a larger cadre of those that may just be a larger group of benefactors in one part of the city than the other, and the result might be maybe we need to work harder to develop such benefactors in other parts of the city or something. So that's really kind of an understanding of not just are we following the rules, but are we also making the best use of just all of the donations that may come in and figuring out how to deploy them equitably.
I understand, and I asked the Inspector General if you understand Mr. Bonner's concern, and is that something possible to include in this review?
Absolutely, no problem.
Okay. Given that acceptance, there's a motion, a second. Are there any other questions or comments on that? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? 0. The motion passes. Thank you. And thank you, Commissioner Bonner. We have 2 reports on the agenda. I'll go to item G, the department's report relative to immigration enforcement. Commander Labrada.
I don't think we need a report, do you? Do you want a report?
Good afternoon, Commissioners.
Good afternoon.
I'll dive into, I'd like to take you back quick to 2016, prior to the inception of California Values Act, SB 54. We've had the opportunity to continue our efforts in ensuring our personnel understand the importance of LAPD's role, and more importantly, steadfast commitment to our communities in the importance of constitutional policing to all residents, regardless of background, place of birth, or legal status, and a consistent reminder to our residents that we will not participate in civil immigration enforcement. Since our time with then Chief Beck and then Director of Operations Chief Moore, our policies have been directed to help ensure ongoing support and compliance for Special Order 40. Now through the leadership of Chief Moore and continuing efforts of Chief Arcos, our direction remains focused on ensuring ongoing education, outreach, discussion, and more importantly, proactive responses to our immigration advocates, community leaders, through ongoing work and our efforts with our immigration communities and advocates for the entire department. Our ongoing commitment remains to the building of trust and outreach to our immigrant communities to know we are not enforcing immigration laws and continuing to support the safety and well-being of all residents, regardless of their background. Since the start of the current administration, we have ensured outreach with our immigrant communities through hundreds of community forums, outreach events, various language media segments addressing the concerns, as well as various public safety announcements of our ongoing effort to remind residents we are not here to do the work of ICE. Our ongoing focus remains ensuring victims, witnesses are not afraid to report crimes, with focus being public safety for all, regardless of immigration status. We have in the past seen slight reduction of some crimes being reported, but overall, the higher number of calls for service for the department, we feel that the message is getting out loud and clear, and support for all victims is being shared. In response to the California Values Act, the department's efforts remain consistent, set on the principles set forth in the California Value Act, with the department's commitment to protecting the public from crime and other harm through collaborative partnerships and constitutional policing principles, including the fair and impartial enforcement of laws regardless of a person's race, ethnicity, national origin, or immigration status. The California Values Act also placed restrictions on local law enforcement agencies participating in federal task forces. Most of these new restrictions are consistent with the longstanding LAPD policies and practices which promote community partnerships and public safety that we adhered to prior to the implementation in 2018. We continue our practices during the first 6 months of 2019 related to this report on ICE detainers, and consistent to ensuring compliance to that, we have received 1,028 ICE detainer requests for the first 6 months of 2019, with 0 of them honored. We had no U.S. ICE transfers, no interview requests received or honored, and we had no ICE release notifications honored. In response to our Joint Task Force participation operations for the first 6 months, the primary purpose of the Joint Law Enforcement Task Force remains that it is not immigration enforcement. The enforcement or investigative duties are related to violation of state or federal laws related to criminal activity and not immigration enforcement, and help us focus on those serious crimes affecting the safety of our residents. In the department's ongoing efforts to address violent crime, gang weapons, narcotics trafficking, human trafficking, child pornography trafficking, and counterterrorism efforts through joint operations with ATF, FBI, U.S. Secret Service, U.S. Customs Enforcement, and Homeland Security investigations, we can report that we have not had any immigration enforcement arrests, but as the summary of the thorough report shows, many arrests for serious crimes that can significantly affect the public safety of our residents. The investigative task force reported in an immigration enforcement report dated August 28th provides details of the arrests related to efforts by Office of Operations, Counterterrorism and Special Operations Bureau, Detective Bureau, with a total wide department task forces of 25. Arrests for non-immigration enforcement crimes equaled 451, with none of those arrests for immigration enforcement. The LAPD's procedures for violation of illegal reentry after conviction of aggravated assaults regarding enforcement of criminal immigration laws remain significantly monitored under the following procedures during a lawful legal detention that is unrelated to immigration. If officers detain for a reasonable period to determine if the suspect has a prior conviction for a serious or violent felony under the California Penal Code. After confirming the prior serious or violent conviction, officers shall notify the Area Watch Commander, who will review all supporting documentations. The contact will be made through our Department Operations Center to our Immigration Liaison Officer, Chief Arcos, and Command Staff Officer will, or his designee will, approve that booking. If approved by the ILO, the Watch Commander will notify Immigration and Customs Enforcement, where the individual will be detained for a reasonable time, no longer than 4 hours. And there's no criminal arrest warrant.
Is it 48 or 4?
4.
4 hours?
4 hours.
Okay.
There is no criminal warrant or non-criminal related charges. Officers must release the individual detained. The Watch Commander must document the results in the Watch Commander's daily report and ensure notifications are made to the Bureau Commanding Officer, and the ILO reviews those thoroughly. We've had 2 incidents of detention that qualify for this, and we reviewed those thoroughly. On both those incidents, we've complied with our policies relative to our policy sets a standard to reentry after deportation, removal to conviction of an aggravated felony, and we were in compliance. The 2 incidents are documented in the report. In summary, the department continues to be in full compliance with the Chief of Police notice regarding immigration enforcement procedures and the state law set forth by the California Values Act. We continue to work on building more streamlined tracking systems to ensure our data collection of immigration information remains a high priority. LAPD has measurably and consistently improved its awareness, outreach, and partnership with community organizations, nonprofits, immigration advocates, schools, and places of worship to help build trust and constant reminder to those residents that we will not participate in civil immigration enforcement. Through our recent participation with our mayor on a PSA to our ongoing forums, our annual participation in local cultural events such as the East LA Parade, next week's Central American Parade, work with our current organizations and advocates to create pocket cards for officers to be rolled out to provide a bridge for our indigenous residents that do not speak English or Spanish and may need Mayan or Zapotec language translation in order to find the correct language to be able to support our victims and witnesses of crime. This way we can contact community translators to know your rights as well as ongoing distribution of our LAPD frequently asked questions. Recently, the department was honored at a immigration ceremony as well at the cathedral for our immigration efforts, which we're very proud of. We'll continue our efforts for the outreach and education to all residents regardless of immigration status.
Great, thank you for that thorough report. Commissioners, questions? Commissioner Goldsmith?
Appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate the diligence and the thorough report. As always, really appreciate the practices that we put into place here, and so much of it was in response to, as you said, a decrease in reporting of crimes and a feeling of lack of trust, not necessarily because anything the department did, but because of the federal atmosphere. And I think the practices that we put in place are part of it, but all the community outreach that you've done is really at least as important, if not more, in building that trust. So I appreciate all of that. I'm really glad to see that no detainer requests or notification requests have been approved. And one of the things that we grappled with a lot in developing this was the sort of collateral consequences of a task force or engagement. Of course, the department would never engage in any activity that had the objective of civil immigration enforcement, but there was concern that that might be the ultimate result by a federal agency. So I'm wondering if we have continued to track whether that's happening and any observations you have about that.
Yeah, it's a monthly report that gets submitted to the department as to the task force operations and what type of arrests are being made, and that's summarized in the report submitted.
So there's no other subsequent actions that ICE or others are taking as related to these
correct
task forces?
Each under officer as well as individual supervisors that are assigned to the task force are required to sign a 2018 notice requiring them to assure them and remind them that they have to adhere to department policies, including the immigration enforcement policies that we have in place.
Great, thank you.
Any other commissioner comments? No. Questions? All right, thank you. The recommendation is to approve the department's report. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second?
It's moved in second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you, Commander. And
Thank you,
congratulations on that recent recognition. Thank you. Item H, the department's report on Cal Gang Criminal Intelligence System audit. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Good afternoon, Commissioners, Inspector General Smith, Chief Moore. I'm Deputy Chief Chris Pitcher. I'm the Chief of Detectives, and I'm here today with Captain Tony Odo. He is the Commanding Officer of Gang and Narcotics Division, and incidentally, he is the department's Cal Gang System Administrator, so he is recognized, he has the expertise, and ultimately he is here and prepared to answer any questions you may have relative to this audit.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. So the department has acknowledged the issues identified in Section 2C of the audit, where 4 subject identification cards were not reviewed or signed by a supervisor. The following corrective action was taken. I contacted all 3 divisions, ensured that the supervisor had been counseled regarding this omission, and determined what further steps they were taking. And 2 of the divisions are adding administrative clerks to their gang impact teams to assist with the administrative workload to allow the supervisors to focus on our requirements. Additionally, Gang and Narcotics Division has completed an administrative order, which is currently with Risk Management and Policies Division, to add additional safeguards and oversight to the use and access to the Cal Gang database. For new entries, for a subject that is not in the Cal gangs, the new procedure will be that a gang impact team supervisor and the gang impact team lieutenant shall review all available source documents and recordings. That's the new addition. They have to review the recordings, the body-worn video and the digital in-car video, to verify that the data to be entered into Cal gangs is accurate and comports with existing policy and procedure for inclusion in the Cal gang database. When adding an entry into an existing subject, either the supervisor or the gang lieutenant shall review all the documents and review the body-worn video and digital in-car video prior to the entry in addition to that, the order addressed inspections. We are going to incorporate monthly inspections that at the divisional level, at the bureau level, where the divisional supervision will take a random sample of recent entries to ensure its accuracy and validity to go into the Cal gang system, make sure that our procedures are being followed. Then the Bureau gang coordinators will conduct a quarterly inspection in the same procedure. And my division, Gang and Narcotics, currently reviews 3 times a year. We will continue to do that, but we are going to add the component of reviewing video. And with that, if you have any questions.
I have some questions. Yes, please. Appreciate the review, the corrective actions. I was going to ask about that. And I also appreciate the recommendations around increasing oversight and checks and balances. I had a couple questions. One is about the, I didn't see in the report that you're auditing the response time when somebody requests to be removed, that happened within 30 days. I don't know if I missed that or if that's not being audited.
I don't think that was included in the report. We did have, out of the 60 in the sample, one person that did contest entry
Right.
into the system. And that happened, it was denied, so they remained in the system, but we didn't look at that specific.
Okay. And I know this isn't the time to have a discussion about sort of the underlying effectiveness of this program and some of the unintended consequences that we've debated in the past, although I would love to have that conversation, but I do wonder whether it's possible to share whatever's publicly shareable about the status of the litigation. And I would hope that once that's resolved, we could have more of a policy discussion here about the ongoing program. Okay, somebody can answer that question.
Well, you're talking about the modifications to the criteria to be entered into Cal gangs?
Well, the litigation and what, I don't know what can be shared about the specific issues that are being
The state is
litigated.
reviewing it. There are some modifications that have been submitted. I believe they should be published somewhere around November and possibly approved by July of next year.
Oh, my. Okay. Thank you.
Other commissioners' questions? I did have a few, if you don't. And my questions are more big picture questions. And I was trying to make the connection between the audit that was conducted as well as, if I'm understanding, the audit arose as a result of the California state audit regarding or making the findings that the system may violate individual rights of individuals. And so I'm trying to make the connection to how the audit addressed that finding on the California system. And I'm not sure it was designed to necessarily, or to determine whether we, the LAPD, was following its own policies and state rules.
The objectives were, developed, looking at the state's 2016 audit. So we essentially wanted to look at what they looked at. And, that's kind of a bigger question than this audit would cover, but what we wanted to do is address the state's concerns. And since 2016, I think a lot of what that state audit found has been implemented at the department, and you can see that in the results where they're relatively high in each objective. So it wasn't necessarily, looking at that what you were talking about, Commissioner.
So the state audit was obviously a statewide.
Statewide, but they
Right.
looked at the same things we
They
did.
looked at the same things. So you did mirror image to see where
Yes.
where the LAPD fell with respect to that
Yes.
finding.
Each objective,
I see.
it's not verbatim, but as close to as we could possibly come.
I understand.
And-
Okay,
And
that,
of course, focusing on the LAPD, not the whole state.
all right, that makes a lot more sense. Thank you, I appreciate that. And that put the whole audit into context for me, so thank you very much. I appreciate it. I don't have any more questions, does anybody? All right, is there a motion to, the recommendation is to approve the department's report? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Passes 5-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chief, I think we're up to you, sir.
Commissioners, good afternoon, and I'm going to provide a series of reports on significant activities as well as a picture of our snapshot of our crime, our categorical or officer-involved shootings, and our personnel strengths. First, in this last week, or a little beyond that, because we did not have a commission meeting last Tuesday, as far as community engagement, we hosted a Jewish community forum in Mid-Wilshire District. I attended the Shoes That Fit outreach effort at the Ricardo Lizarraga Elementary School this past Thursday, where the Dodger Foundation, working with LAPD and LA Unified School District, were able to fit more than 200 young people with shoes. And as I provided these welcomed items, I was confident that many of them, this was their first set of new shoes in quite some time. So I appreciate the generosity of the Dodger Foundation. We also, this past Sunday, I attended a Calvary Church of Pacoima and visited the congregation there, spoke about our efforts in building trust, but also our outreach and engagement in recruitment, particularly within the African American community. It was a very lively congregation, but also one that I want to recognize their historical importance in Pacoima. That was actually the birthplace of the San Fernando Valley NAACP, and they have primarily an African American community of a congregation, and their outreach with people, particularly experiencing homelessness, is to be commended. This last week, we also had an opportunity just yesterday, and Commissioner Decker, thank you for your attendance in swearing in the new LeLay Board of Directors. Proud to see the Sergeant as the first woman president of that organization and her appointment, as well as a new slate of some existing board members, but also new individuals within the organization. I think are going to take that organization even further in the development of our personnel and getting our people ready for future advancement and their work. This morning, I apologize for my tardiness. We had our 25-year service pin ceremony, where I got an opportunity to see a lot of families and friends as they celebrated a quarter century of service, both sworn and civilians within the organization. The other matter last week, we also had the 2019 Fleet Week. I want to thank the Deputy Mayor Gorell, as well as Harbor Division and a number of the Port Police in hosting our military naval services. It gave us an opportunity last Wednesday to talk about our readiness for catastrophic events here in this region. We're reminded by the events on the East Coast, frequently by hurricanes and floods and other disasters. And of course, we know here all too well the risk of fire, but many of our residents and communities have lost sight of this. We're an earthquake country. So it was a good day to spend with our military leaders and our California State Emergency Management folks, and as well as other partners in public safety, to talk about what would be needed in the immediate days and aftermath of a catastrophic earthquake here in this region, and our reliance upon the outside world for water and basic necessities, food and power and so forth, and how public safety, police and fire locals will oversee that, but need to be aware of what resources can be brought to bear. So that was a good day. It's an annual event. A great event for the San Pedro community, where we also supported not just our military men and women coming and for a little bit of shore break, but a number of tens of thousands. I believe the last estimate was 250,000 people that attended Fleet Week in some fashion or form in the harbor area. I also want to update you. We've had conversations in the past relative to an investigation involving a refused fascism of Los Angeles. This was an activist group that there was a Times report on the 19th of July, LA Times, that published an article detailing our use of a confidential informant to investigate the activities of the Los Angeles chapter of Refuse Fascism. The article at the time, as a reminder, stated that back in October of 2017, we used a confidential informant to attend 4 of that group's planning meetings that were held at 2 separate church locations, and that the article's assertion was that the Board of Police Commissioners were unaware of that surveillance operation, and the article noted that department guidelines for the Anti-Terrorism Intelligence Section, ATIS, that section, its guidelines require the approval of the Board of Police Commissioners president or a member of the Undercover Investigation Committee of this board prior to utilization of that informant. In response to the issues that were raised in that article, I directed the Office of Constitutional Policing to do a top-to-bottom review. What occurred before, during, and after, what the facts and circumstances, and that review has been completed. And I've been briefed as to their evaluation of the adherence of the department's policies and procedures relative to our intelligence guidelines, the actual use of informants, as well as what notification procedures took place. And from that review, I've determined that the Major Crimes Division investigation conformed with all the procedures that are described and are obligated within the intelligence guidelines for Major Crimes Division Anti-Terrorism Intelligence Section. Apologize for the group of words. They also, I believe, adhered to all informant guidelines for their criminal investigation into the refused fascism in Los Angeles. That's as described by our department manual, our department informant manual. Additionally, major crimes adhered to all notification procedures relative to the investigation into that organization, and the approval of the Board of Police Commissioners president or a member of the Undercover Investigation Committee prior to utilizing that informant was not required, given that this was a criminal investigation and was not conducted by the Anti-Terrorism Intelligence Section. And also, while it was not required by existing policy or procedure, the investigative strategies used by the Criminal Investigation Section of Major Crimes during the criminal investigation were reviewed in advance by senior members of this department, including myself in the role at that point as the Director of the Office of Operation, the Assistant Chief Gramala, the Director of Office of Special Operations, but also this included a full briefing with Chief Charlie Beck during this investigation. Now, over the course of my review, I've determined that while there are codified procedures surrounding the use of undercover officers and informants in all anti-terrorism intelligence gathering cases, similar procedures don't exist for using confidential informants in criminal investigations where similar sensitive circumstances may exist. Specifically, the use of a confidential informant or undercover officer in a place of worship or other sensitive location where First Amendment protected activities is conducted, I believe should receive a higher level of scrutiny and approval before becoming operational, to ensure that the benefit of the investigative technique is not outweighed by the potential loss of public trust. So going forward, I've directed the development of codified procedures involving a more rigorous review process of the use of undercover officers and confidential informants in criminal investigations where the investigation involves the surveillance of sensitive locations. An example of that would be a place of worship, particularly where the purpose of the gathering is the practicing of religious beliefs. A law office where you have possible impingement on attorney-client privilege. A medical facility involving a doctor-patient privilege. I expect the necessary revisions to the appropriate documents as well as specific training for our command and investigative personnel will be completed by the end of this year. So what happened in this investigation, I believe, was consistent with our policies and procedures. It wasn't required to this body to be notified, and it was not obligated by our intelligence guidelines, given the nature of the criminal investigation and the entity that conducted it. However, what I also recognize is that, nonetheless, the department internally took upon itself a review at the most senior levels of the organization to balance that test of whether or not this criminal investigation warranted the use of a confidential informant in the limited instances in which the individual is used at publicly announced meetings at a place of worship. Finally, giving the pending criminal trial of at least one of the individuals involved in the September 27th, 2017 arrest, I believe that it's appropriate for me to refrain from further detailing the nature of this matter to avoid any conflict with the court's involvement as they deliberate this. That's my verbal report or update relative to that facts and circumstance. I apologize that today we do not have an audience of public members that are here. However, I trust that they'll have the ability to review this, the recording of this, should there be further interest. Regarding crime, unless there's a question or comment on this.
Would that, any version of that be coming back to the commission, or is that more just operational?
This is meant to close the matter with you relative to the facts and circumstances, the nature of this criminal investigation, and its adherence to the requirements relative to the use of criminal informants.
And Chief,
Confidential
I just ask, not that it come back to the full commission, but perhaps just consult with a subcommittee that it's going for. That'd be helpful, I think.
That would be happy to speak with the Intelligence Committee and answer any questions or concerns.
And I'll just note also on that matter, excuse me, Chief, sorry. As I think you know, the Department of Justice also has similar guidelines, and they can be a good outline of different procedures that the department may want to consider in establishing its own rules and procedures in this area.
Exactly, thank you. And I do anticipate that the subcommittee, well, not anticipate, I'm committed to returning to the subcommittee these revisions that I've talked about so that to demonstrate transparency and our responsiveness. Relative to crime and instances, we still have seen a reduction in overall violent crime. However, in these last 2 weeks, what we have lost is the reduction in the number of homicides this year versus last. We have had 183 homicides as this last Saturday. That number was 175 a year ago for the same period. We've seen, while we've seen a continued reduction for the last few months in the number of shooting victims, this past week that gap grew an increase rather than what had been week after week decreases. We've got approximately 29 additional shooting victims this year versus last. So while the numbers are low, however, we have been drawn to the concentration of them occurring in basically 4 commands. And I will draw attention to 77th Division, Southeast Division, Newton Division, and Hollenbeck. And in working with Chief Arcos and the Bureau Commands and involved area commands, while we are concerned about these increases, we're also tasking our gang reduction youth development resources and our community resources to understand what's driving those increases in violence from this year versus last, and what efforts beyond enforcement we can be engaged in. Simultaneous to that, we have deployed our crime suppression details within our existing areas, and the Metropolitan Division has continued to remain within its geographic platoon areas rather than bulking them in any one particular area of the city. So this is as the summer months are where historically our highest levels of violent crimes have occurred. Last year, August and September were 3-year lows for the number of homicides compared to the previous 3 years. So we're bucking our success from that period. And the tenor that we're taking with our command officers and with our chief duty officers that are working at night is what is our community engagement, what are our other partners in their efforts. I'm pleased, for instance, in seeing in 77th Division a number of peace marches and vigils that community members are stepping forward, as well as members of the clergy, to say the end of street violence and to stop the senselessness of gun violence. And we are also, again, working with our community-based organizations to understand what factors can they do to disrupt or slow down and change the course of what I'm describing right here. I made a similar kind of conversation back in March of this year, and I believe that we saw good results organizations, a full spectrum, tied to more focused efforts in those communities, and I anticipate the same here. But I do want to bring up what has been a good summer where we were seeing reductions. This past couple weeks, those losses in those particular commands has drawn our attention. As to officer-involved shootings, we had no categorical or no officer-involved shootings the last 2-week period of time. So year to date, we've had 19 officer-involved shootings. Last year, that number was 25. That's a 24% reduction. And over a 4-year average, it's a 40% reduction. So we continue to see success in our efforts to minimize the use or eliminate, whenever possible, having to resort to the use of deadly force. Now moving over to our traffic statistics.
Actually,
yes.
Chief, before you leave that, would you mind just restating the statistics that you were just talking about in terms of the 4 divisions? It sounds like you're saying that it's not increased, but the decrease is slowing. Is that what you're saying? Or
No. Well, no. Those are each of those 4. I'm sorry. The 4 commands are 77th, Southeast, Newton, and Hollenbeck, and each of those have seen an increase in violence and in shooting violence versus the previous year.
And what's the increase?
I'm sorry?
What's the increase?
I don't have the exact
Oh,
numbers. There's 30 homicides in 77th year to date. That's about 2 additional homicides from a year ago. However, the number of increased shooting victims in 77th Division exceeds our overall increase for the entire city in shooting victims. So the concentration of shooting victims are in those 4 commands that is drawing a concern. Counterpart, Southwest Division, is having a great year in reduction in shooting victims and homicides. And so we're looking to see what is different, what is going on in one command versus the other.
Mm-hmm.
To this point, it appears to be conflict between individual street gangs going back and forth and expressing violence on one another. But there are also innocent other individuals who are not involved with any gang or their activities that are also being subjected to this violence. We had, for instance, a homicide last Thursday, I believe it was, in the morning of a cannabis. It was an unlicensed cannabis location, but of what I believe was a security guard there that was murdered during some activity there, whether it was a robbery or we don't really know. But the violence is not just centered on just gun violence from one vehicle to another, or from a vehicle to a pedestrian.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
In regards to our traffic scenario, we've continued to see basically a flat number as far as the number of fatal collisions, with 155 fatal collisions this year versus 157 last year. Area of concern that I've identified earlier remains our DUI-related collisions involving serious injuries or deaths. Those are up this year versus last. And our motor vehicle versus PEDs, pedestrians, continue to see about a 2% increase this year versus last as far as the number of serious injuries or deaths. Areas that we'll continue to work on with our Vision Zero and our traffic enforcement efforts. Moving over to our personnel finally, those numbers reflect 9,971 sworn police officers, 2,929 civilian employees, 388 reserve officers, and 1,779 cadets, which is an increase from my earlier numbers by about 300 for our cadets. And that concludes my remarks.
Questions of the chief? Any questions? Seeing none, I will only add, Chief, that I join in a comment you made that it is very unfortunate that there are no members of the public here. The room was cleared during our closed session. Due to the level of disruption, we could not proceed, and we could not hear each other, nor could we conduct business. It's never ideal to do that. We all benefit from hearing from members of the public, even if and perhaps especially when we disagree on different items. But obviously, if disruptions occur, we have to clear the room so that the business of the commission can continue. So I join in the comment that you made that it's truly unfortunate that there are no members of the public here. With that, we've concluded our agenda. Thank you, Chief. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Passes 5-0. Thank you, everyone. That concludes the Board of Commission meeting.